A nervous young man stood frozen, sweat glinting on his jaw as tension filled the air. The blonde girl, cheeks flushed, quietly admitted that she really liked manga too. A single thought echoed. Someone wondered how everything could have gone so wrong. The red-haired girl squeezed someone's hand and gently asked if they could really say something like that right now. A heavy pause lingered, and someone struggled to finish their sentence, unable to express the emotion rising inside. A young woman with long dark hair peeked nervously from behind the door, quietly asking how things were going. Someone admitted they just wanted a normal life. A confident blue-haired girl stood with her arms crossed, excitedly telling everyone there was something new she had come to love. A silent question hangs in the air, as doubt unsettles everything that came before. A dynamic and commanding figure thrust their finger forward, the sharp gesture slicing through the tension in the room. A young man with dark hair pressed his cheek to his hand, breathing heavily, as someone nearby called out that Kim Yoo-sung had arrived. A single thought echoed. Someone wondered how everything had ended up like this. A glowing green heartbeat line spiked sharply against the darkness, each pulse echoing the tension building in the air. A young man with dark hair slowly opened his eye, tension crackling as someone nearby shouted for a doctor. Confusion hung in the air as someone struggled to make sense of what was happening. Someone nearby urgently called for the doctor, announcing that the injured young man with dark hair had finally opened his eyes. Someone in the darkness called out, confused and trying to understand where they were. A man in glasses leaned in, asking if the weak girl could hear him and if she remembered anything before the accident. A young man with dark hair explained that he was just a graduate student trying to save his research during the lab fire. He admitted he couldn't get out in time and remembered losing consciousness. A young man with dark hair wondered aloud where he was and questioned if he might be in a hospital. A young man with dark hair gasped in surprise, unable to process what he was seeing. A young man with dark hair stared upward and said he couldn't believe what he was seeing. He realized with a jolt that the face staring back at him was not his own. He recalled faint memories from his hospital stay, admitting he was starting to piece things together. Still, the young man with dark hair stared at his reflection and said quietly that he had transmigrated. A woman with long black hair corrected the nurse, telling her that the boy's name was Kim Yoo-sung. A young man with dark hair stands frozen as a car speeds toward him, caught between panic and disbelief. The young man with dark hair sat quietly in the vehicle, wondering if he had died in the fire and now possessed Kim Yoo-sung's body. The young man with dark hair wondered aloud if he was finally free from the nightmare of grad school. The young man with dark hair sat in the car, thinking he shouldn't assume the possession would last, and quietly sighing to himself. He wondered aloud how he was supposed to adjust to living in this unfamiliar place. A car crept toward the house as tension crackled in the air. A concerned and caring mother called down from the stairway, telling the young man with dark hair to get some rest, and he agreed. A young man with dark hair paused before a closed door, quietly noting this must be Kim Yoo-sung's room, and that his body seemed to move on instinct. A young man with dark hair peeked through the door, quietly admitting it felt strange to enter someone else's room and asking permission to come in. The young man with dark hair watched cautiously from behind the door, his eyes wide with shock. Someone cried out in disbelief, unable to comprehend what they were seeing. Suddenly, the bookshelf shook as colorful books rattled from the impact. Then, a confident blonde girl with twin ponytails gestured energetically while a figure in a frilly outfit stepped forward behind her. A confident young woman with purple hair raised her arm on stage as two other girls struck bold poses under the dazzling lights. A young man with dark hair stood quietly, watching as a small horned creature gazed up at him in silence. A girl with a long ponytail sized up the boy and thought he was an absolute geek. The dark-haired boy muttered that he was seriously fed up. A young man with dark hair stood completely still, his hair sticking up as he waited in silence. A young man with dark hair sat on the floor and quietly wondered if he could really live as Kim Yoo-sung. A purple-haired girl balanced on one foot and admitted she had no idea how to act like someone else without arousing suspicion. A young man with dark hair sat on the floor, wondering what to do before suddenly noticing something strange in the mirror. A close-up revealed a young man with dark hair striking a finger gun pose, as the narrator wondered aloud if he really looked like Kim Yoo-sung. A young man with dark hair crashed hard into the wooden wall, shocked, as another person in the background raised a hand toward him. A young man with dark hair points his finger like a gun, while two winged girls hover behind him, and he recognizes a manga poster in disbelief. Kim Yoo-sung touched his chest, letting out a worried thought that he was a hardcore otaku who cosplayed nonstop. A young man with dark hair sat on the floor, thinking he should check which manga might match the way he had acted. A young man with dark hair flashes a peace sign behind a smiling elf-like girl as they pose together for a playful photo. A young man with dark hair stared at the book, thinking he'd seen a character like this before, and suddenly remembered where. A blonde-haired boy stood awkwardly as one girl clung to his arm, and another tugged his sleeve, the bold title Scramble Love shining above them. A teasing and inquisitive blonde girl joked that the boy might be falling for the woman in the bikini by the ocean. A woman in a wedding dress smiled warmly at Ruji while a young girl with a megaphone cheered, wishing him happiness in the finale. Pieces of torn paper scattered across the wooden floor as voices online argued heatedly about the ending and whether a childhood friend romance needed more build-up. A young man with dark hair wondered aloud if he should read a book that seemed similar to one he already knew. A young man with dark hair said he couldn't stop, his anxious eyes fixed on the swirling planets around him. The ground shook with a steady, ominous tremor. A young man with dark hair shouted in frustration. A young man with dark hair admitted to himself that he liked the story and had spent the whole night reading the rest. A woman with long wavy hair asked a young man with dark hair named Yoo-sung if he could handle any customer orders that came in. The woman with long wavy hair reassured her son, while Kim Yoo-sung replied playfully and then privately questioned how that overly dramatic line actually worked. A young man with dark hair welcomed the customers, thinking that being the son of a barbecue restaurant owner really helped his protein intake. A young man with dark hair blinked in confusion, quietly wondering what was happening. A blonde girl clung to a blonde boy's arm as he told her not to cling so much, but she insisted people would just think they were close siblings. A cheerful girl with golden hair tied in twin tails announced she was going to feed someone today, insisting they couldn't escape. A blonde young man scratched the back of his head, feeling uneasy after someone called out to him with awkward familiarity. The black-haired young man stared in disbelief, quietly wondering if the person before him could truly be Ruji. A confident blonde young man flashed a peace sign and laughed, declaring with pride that he really was Sakamoto Ruji from Scramble Love. A cautious blonde young man and a wary girl approached a dark-haired man in an apron, telling him to wait before he could speak. A crucial truth hit. This wasn't just a typical reincarnation. A dark-haired young man stared at his hand in horror, suddenly realizing he had been possessed inside a book. An open book appeared, and someone announced it was time to summarize. A shocked young man with dark hair stood frozen before the fire, realizing he had awakened inside the body of someone called Kim Yoo-sung. A shocked young man with dark hair pointed urgently at a mysterious figure, saying he realized Kim Yoo-sung was just an extra in Scramble Love. The narrator explained they'd possessed a character inside a book called Super Strong Level Up with a Novel Only I Know, Volume 1. A young man with dark hair admitted he only knew Scramble Love from online spoilers, insisting he had no real advantage as Yuka urged him to eat. A young man with dark hair watched in silence as a blonde girl told a blonde boy the world felt as real as any romance novel. A blonde-haired young man nervously insisted he would eat it himself if the other person just stayed still. A young man with dark hair told himself that living as an extra would finally let him have a normal life. The narrator explained that life became very busy after that. He read every book in the room, determined to learn how to act like Kim Yoo-sung and get rid of his chinibyu hair. A young man with dark hair accepted a full scholarship on stage, quietly thinking he had chosen this distant school for a fresh start. He joined the student council and, as a young man with dark hair, explained he slowly changed his whole personality, blaming puberty. Still, the narrator explained the possession had never been undone. A young man with dark hair sat at his desk, quietly telling himself he needed to adapt and prepare for whatever might come next. A hand scribbled notes about saving and investing, while the unseen character wondered aloud if putting an entire paycheck into stocks made sense. Small bunny-like creatures lifted dumbbells, while someone wondered aloud if exercise might be the answer. Someone insisted that strength and stamina are essential for survival. A young boy jogged on the treadmill, thinking it was smarter to be prepared, even if the world felt like a rom-com. A black-haired young man powered through another set, gritting out that he only needed one more rep, while a muscular man urged him on. Pure joy burst through the scene, as someone declared just how satisfying and fun it all felt. A flushed young man with dark hair beamed after his boxing session, while a muscular bald man behind him offered an encouraging thumbs up. Moments later, gentle pink petals drifted down as the story quietly moved forward. Sunlight warmed the building as pink petals floated softly through the air, wrapping the scene in a gentle, peaceful hush. A shy girl blushed and quietly murmured the word foot as someone's large step landed nearby in the schoolyard. Still, a blond young man looked thoughtfully to the side as pink petals floated around him, while a young man with dark hair stood nearby. A young man with dark hair hesitated and whispered uncertainly as he stared at the board covered in names. A young man with dark hair smiled softly as cherry blossom petals drifted down around him. A young man with dark hair greeted someone, saying they had arrived earlier than expected. A cheerful and eager boy called out to a tall, muscular young man, asking which class Yusung had received. A hesitant thought echoed in the silence. He admitted he still didn't know the answer, determination flickering in his voice as petals drifted around him. He quietly acknowledged reaching his second year as purple petals drifted down. Blossoms drifted past as a young man with dark hair realized he was already starting his sophomore year. Still, the young man with dark hair quietly remarked that the year had gone by quickly. A muscular young man strained as he lifted a loaded barbell, thinking he'd pulled off an impressive bulk-up over the past few months. A young man with dark hair focused on his mission, telling himself that everything he did was to protect himself. A young man with dark hair considered how manga worlds are filled with aliens, ghosts, and yakuza, then admitted that's just what he's read in rom-coms. A young man with dark hair clenched his fist and insisted to himself that his strict training was for survival, not just a muscle obsession. A man in a black suit strode forward with his shoulder bag, telling himself he'd had a good year and wanted to keep the momentum going. He reminded himself that he had made this decision only a moment earlier. Someone called out urgently for Ruji as the classroom door labeled 2B stood open. A cheerful young woman with short brown hair and green eyes greeted everyone brightly, wishing them a good morning. A blonde-haired boy in a school uniform admitted it wasn't a good morning and was asked if something had happened today. A blonde boy chatted with a girl by his desk, while a young man with dark hair sat confidently apart, clearly unsettled by their new class arrangement. A young man with dark hair crossed his arms, silently worrying that getting involved with someone he wanted to avoid could ruin his peaceful school life. A blonde-haired boy explained that his day kept getting worse, starting with losing his wallet and accidentally running into a girl on the street. A young man with dark hair stood rigid as the thought of accidentally bumping into her flashed through his mind. The teacher called for everyone to quiet down and take their seats as the blonde boy noticed him and the brown-haired girl prepared to sit. A calm man in a suit addressed the room, telling everyone that even though the term just started, they needed to listen for a moment. A bored blonde boy announced that he had something important to share, while a surprised blonde girl asked if it was really that important. A cheerful and inviting man announced there was a transfer student and invited a hesitant girl standing by the doorway to come inside. One blonde-haired girl leaned in and kissed another blonde-haired girl, letting a quiet wave of affection pass between them. A cheerful blonde girl with a ponytail called out that she was coming, her bag swinging as she hurried over. Students whispered that the blonde girl looked stunning and wondered if she was a foreigner, while the teacher joked about wishing they paid this much attention in class. A confident man in a suit told the smiling blonde girl that she was new here and asked everyone to help her and introduce themselves. With a bright smile, the cheerful blonde girl announced her name was Kishimoto Rika and said she was excited to meet everyone. Still, a brown-haired male student watched the group and thought he should have realized something about sharing a class with the protagonist. A thoughtful young man with dark hair considered that a main heroine would inevitably transfer into their class. A hand gripped a phone, and the observer recalled that Kishimoto Rika had always dominated the popularity polls, even without reading Scramble Love. A young man with dark hair stands quietly as the teacher announces that Kishimoto should prepare to take his assigned seat. A commanding man pointed at a girl sitting alone, instructing Sakamoto to watch over her, since she'd be sitting nearby. The blonde-haired boy looked back and quietly wondered what was happening. The blonde-haired character suddenly realized they were facing the violent girl from earlier that morning. A blonde girl with green eyes pointed at someone and shouted in anger. The angry blonde girl shouted that the boy was the pervert she had seen earlier that morning. A calm, authoritative figure in a suit ordered everyone to be quiet and told them to sit down, mentioning it was good they already knew each other. A blonde girl complained that this was the worst, and a blonde boy snapped back that she had stolen his line. A blonde girl in a pink sweater glared at the surprised blonde boy, and he stammered in disbelief at what he saw. The blonde girl with a ponytail turned away, making it clear she didn't care what anyone else thought. A gray-haired young man grimaced, letting out a sharp sound as pain shot through him. A blonde girl handed a wallet back to a yellow-haired boy, and he thanked her with a hesitant voice. A blonde girl nearby grew frustrated, thinking she couldn't handle 2 more years of this, and wishing she could transfer to another school. A wall clock ticked closer to noon, the sound filling the room with a growing sense of urgency. A blonde boy asked a dark-haired boy if he could borrow the manga magazine, and the other replied that he could. The blonde student handed the manga over, and the dark-haired boy said he still loved these stories and hoped they'd help him in the future. The narrator pointed out that even without reading Scramble Love, anyone could guess what happened, since this world obeyed classic rom-com rules. Still, a curly-haired girl called the male student cute, while a black-haired girl with ribbon asked if he wanted to hang out with them. An urgent blonde boy grabbed the surprised blonde girl's hands and asked her to come with him because he needed to speak privately. The blonde-haired boy told the blonde-haired girl he wanted to talk about the accident, and she reluctantly agreed, but only for a short time. A black-haired male announced to the class that he was going to the bathroom, hinting there might be something happening between 2 students. A young man with dark hair walked away down the hallway, as a blonde girl with glasses watched him from a short distance behind. A bandaged hand slammed down on the wooden surface, radiating a surge of determination. Dark and purple energy swirled around the determined young man as he summoned power with unwavering focus. All 4 students froze in the hallway, each one shaken and overwhelmed by what they had just witnessed. Kim Yusong, a muscular young man, strode down the dim hallway wreathed in ominous purple energy as rumors about his deadly reputation echoed. A young man with dark hair glanced down the hallway, quietly noting that his new size made walking through the crowd much easier. A young man with dark hair sighed, saying he wanted to hurry and see what happened between the 2, even if he understood rom-com rules. A blonde girl winked playfully and thought she needed to witness the event herself to improve her accuracy. A young man with dark hair considered where, in this school, a private conversation could actually happen. A young man with dark hair locked onto his decision and said there was only one place he could go. A blonde boy faced the blonde girl and told her they should head to the school backyard. A blonde-haired boy bows deeply, urgently apologizing that he didn't mean to cause any trouble. A dark-haired young man watches from the bushes, quietly recognizing the gesture as something called the apologetic palm press. A dark-haired young man, watching from the bushes, thought he couldn't believe the blonde-haired boy was actually striking that embarrassing pose like a rom-com lead. A blonde girl with a serious expression glares at the shorter blonde-haired person, her arms crossed and tension thick between them. A blonde girl smirked and let out a stifled laugh, unable to hold back her amusement for another moment. The blonde girl let out a loud laugh, openly teasing the blonde-haired boy as he bowed nervously behind her. The blonde girl leaned in with a sly grin and teased the listener about being unexpectedly innocent. The blonde girl reassured the blonde-haired boy that she wasn't upset and insisted she could easily handle what happened that morning. A nervous and confused speaker questioned someone about why they had acted that way earlier. The dark-haired young man grinned through leafy branches and said he only teased the unseen listener because their shocked reaction was too tempting to resist. Kishimoto Rika, cheerful and popular, laughed as the blonde-haired boy recoiled in surprise beside her. A black-haired male character watched carefully from behind, thick bushes, thinking this was the girl's first meeting event with the male lead. A dark-haired young man crouched near the bushes, while a girl with a red hair accessory watched him quietly from behind. A dark-haired young man crouched behind leaves as a woman with a red fan demanded to know what Kim Yoo-sung was doing there. The dark-haired girl accused someone unseen of spying on schoolgirls, her voice cool as she partly hid behind a bright red folding fan. Sionji Kumiko, a descendant of a powerful Kyoto noble family and head of the student council, is introduced with an air of authority and mystery. The dark-haired girl posed with confident flair, her sly smile and fan announcing she was exactly the type others called a villainous archetype. A frustrated dark-haired young man glanced sideways as the confident girl with a fan sized him up, convinced she would cross paths with the protagonist. A focused young woman with dark hair held a bush close and began to explain her reasoning, her tone intent and measured. A young man with dark hair held the branch and explained he thought it would suit the student council room if he wanted to blend in. A dark-haired schoolgirl peered closely at the bush and wondered aloud why anyone would leave something like this in the student council room. A serious young woman fixed her gaze ahead, determination flickering in her eyes. Moments later, one hand gripped the slender branch tightly as another hand reached out, fingertips just brushing the rough bark. A serious young man looked down thoughtfully at the quiet girl with a flower hairpin and admitted he still couldn't let go of his doubts. The dark-haired girl held up the leafy branch and said she would display it in the room to honor the secretary's effort. The dark-haired young man quietly thanked her, surprised she believed the excuse he had just made. A curious and attentive student asked the busy boy in the black uniform why he was suddenly easy to find after a hectic start to the semester. A confident dark-haired girl smiled with a red fan and said she was inviting the secretary to join a meal with the student council officers. The dark-haired girl urged the muscular young man to hurry, saying there would be no seats left in the cafeteria if they were late. The dark-haired girl wondered aloud if the cafeteria had anything suitable for the president. The dark-haired girl taunted the dark-haired boy, saying he clearly didn't know her as well as he thought. The confident young woman with long dark hair said she was well aware of commoner food and culture, hinting she wasn't as naive as expected. The dark-haired girl boasted that she could easily enjoy commoner food, insisting she truly understood the lives of ordinary people. The dark-haired young man wondered if the dark-haired girl was subtly insulting his family's restaurant, but admitted the steak was cooked perfectly for her tastes. The muscular young man informed the dark-haired girl that the cafeteria didn't serve spicy pork rice bowls. An anxious, surprised girl pressed for details, so the calm, informative boy told her they served jayadin instead, describing it as a similar dish. The dark-haired girl frowned, thinking aloud that the name jayadin sounded crude and reminded her of cheap junk food rather than something familiar. The dark-haired girl nervously asked the dark-haired boy if she really had to eat the jayadin, insisting she was nothing like ordinary students. A dark-haired young man spotted someone nearby and calmly said he had finally found where Milady was. A serious young man in a black student uniform adjusted his glasses and announced he had searched everywhere for Kumiko, insisting she must return right away. A stern man with glasses stepped forward and asked if Kim Yoo-sung was the serious and alert young man standing in the schoolyard. A serious, loyal young man adjusted his glowing glasses, quietly realizing what had truly been going on all along. An aggressive student pointed at Kim Yoo-sung, loudly accusing him of neglecting his student council duties, while Kim Yoo-sung demanded to know what he was talking about. A dark-haired schoolgirl flushed with embarrassment as concern was voiced about her wandering around in search of someone, even skipping her meals. A dark-haired young man frowned, quietly questioning if someone was truly poor and skipping meals. A blushing girl shouted that she never said she was sad, clutching a bushy object in front of a tall, calm young man. A serious young man with glasses raised his voice, insisting he could not tolerate the insolent brat's behavior, while a blushing girl protested that it was misunderstood. Akagi Shinjiro declared his devotion to his mistress, but the girl tugged him away, reminding him the wagyu steak was getting cold. Kim Yoo-sung apologized to the secretary, saying they should eat together another time, while clinging to the dark-haired girl who looked distressed. A confused young man with dark hair stared ahead, admitting to himself that he had no idea what was happening. Two female students in matching uniforms stroll past the old school building, laughing together as cherry blossoms drift through the gentle breeze. After school, students gather near the Line 7 subway entrance as cherry blossom petals drift quietly through the air. A tall, muscular young man walked confidently through the crowd as a surprised girl stared at him. A serious dark-haired male character stared into the blue light, silently marking the moment he believed Scramble Love truly began. A cheerful boy held up a manga magazine and asked the bulky, uneasy boy if he wanted to read together, while a worried girl watched. The muscular young man clenched his fist with a smirk and said he was glad he'd worked out, while the surprised girl wondered if he was a mobster. A digital clock glowed above the quiet train platform, and the announcer reminded everyone there were still 10 minutes until the train would arrive. A can labeled PALS with a bright orange design tumbled from someone's hand and clattered loudly onto the floor. A young man with dark hair snapped open a can of drink and remarked that now the leads had met, the story would move forward on its own. A desperate young man shouted that all he wanted was to live a normal life as just another extra. A light-haired character gripped the lapel of someone in dark clothing, quietly remarking that everything was going according to plan. A dark-haired young man glanced sideways, quietly wondering what had just caught his attention. Kishimoto Rika, cheerful and blonde, greeted Kim Yu-sung in the hallway and reminded him they were classmates. A dark-haired young man stared ahead in shock, wondering aloud why she had suddenly appeared. Pink blossoms frame a cheerful blonde girl as she beams, her relief clear as she tells Kim Kwon she's glad to have run into him. The blonde girl asked the dark-haired young man if he knew how to get to their destination. The dark-haired young man hesitated, then asked the blonde girl how she already knew his name. A confident individual pointed to his name tag and said his name was Kim Yu-sung. A confident blonde girl pointed playfully at Kim Kwon, saying she could see his name written clearly right in front of her. The dark-haired young man realized he had forgotten about his name tag and quietly admitted he hadn't even considered it. A smug blonde woman pressed her hand to her chin and let out a dismissive laugh. A cheerful blonde girl told the dark-haired young man that she always knew he was a good person. The black-haired young man wondered if she truly saw him as a good person. Still, the black-haired young man silently wondered what the blonde girl meant by her words. The blonde woman questioned the dark-haired young man, asking how he could remember her and insisting he was exactly the type of person she'd expected. The dark-haired boy glared at the blonde girl, questioning why she found his presence in class so noticeable and unsettling. Rumors swirled about the dark-haired young man, including wild stories of biker fights and Yakuza interest, making classmates curious about his true self. A smiling blonde girl told the other person she thought they must be genuinely kind, since he was so friendly even though they'd just met. A thoughtful young man stared at the vending machine, quietly repeating Rika Kishimoto's name to himself and marveling at how much had changed so quickly. The dark-haired young man panicked inwardly, realizing he had forgotten about name tags and was already caught up with one of the main heroines. He wondered if the naturally kind and popular girl was nice to everyone, and debated whether he should act tough to push her away. Someone suddenly called out, shouting Kim Kwon's name and snapping the dark-haired young man out of his thoughts. A blonde girl with a ponytail confronted the man in a black suit, insisting he seemed like a good person while he apologized for ignoring her. Train platform doors slid closed as an unseen speaker pressed for an answer, and the unseen respondent replied with sarcasm, barely acknowledging the compliment. A blonde-haired character's lips curled into a smug smirk, silently radiating confidence. A dark-haired young man assured the blonde person that others might misjudge her now, but he believed they would eventually understand her true self. A blonde girl reassured the tall dark-haired boy that once people got to know him, they'd realize his kindness beneath that intimidating look. The blonde girl promised warmly that she'd stay by his side as a friend, sharing her excitement for what the future might bring. A dark-haired young man looked away in silence, his serious expression giving nothing away. A playful blonde girl with cat ears asked the dark-haired boy about his nun doll, while he realized there was no way to surprise someone with her personality. A dark-haired young man told Rika he planned to keep acting like an extra, and said he was also looking forward to what was next. A cheerful blonde girl shouted her agreement, her voice rising with excitement. A skeptical and doubtful unnamed thinker silently questioned whether someone's plan was really working, convinced to themselves that the other person must be delusional. A curious unknown speaker asked Kim Kuan if he knew how to get to the address shown on the folder. A dark-haired young man quietly admitted he had just moved and found the train lines confusing, then realized something was strange about this place. A bright cityscape stretched ahead as the narrator wondered if Rika might secretly come from a wealthy background. A cheerful blonde girl with green eyes told the other person they could take the same train as her since it was near her place. A surprised blonde girl's green eye widened suddenly, her shock clear in the close-up. The surprised blonde girl asked if the dark-haired young man really lived nearby, and he calmly replied that his stop was only 2 stations from hers. The cheerful and optimistic blonde girl declared it must be fate they live so close, then quickly corrected herself, remembering he was supposed to be fated with Ruji. A dark-haired young man tensed as a flash of energy zipped past his ear, muttering that he had no choice but to act now. A black book pulsed with purple energy as the narrator admitted they'd prepared to survive, but had never read the original manga, Scramble Love. A confident blonde girl faced the blonde boy, while a secluded and quiet boy sat alone at his desk, reflecting that real answers come straight from Rika. The narrator decided the best move was to befriend Rika for information and planned to offer advice if conflicts happened between her and others. A dark-haired young man clenched his fists and threatened the blonde-haired man, warning him to date Rika or face the consequences. A dark-haired young man smirked to himself, thinking that getting help from a classmate was a typical romance manga move and wouldn't disrupt the story. A dark-haired young man offered a drink to the blonde girl, saying it was his treat, and she asked in surprise if he really meant it. The friend expressing gratitude told the other person to see the drink as thanks for friendship, then happily chose a Coke from the vending machine. A blonde girl casually sipped cola from a bright red can, enjoying the calm moment without saying a word. The blonde girl with a ponytail declared her love for soda as she grinned and raised her can in celebration. The blonde girl cheerfully told the dark-haired young man that she hadn't had Coke in a while because she was watching her figure. Then, the blonde girl teased someone off-screen, asking if they were also trying to watch their figure. A hand revealed Rika's fashion photos on a smartphone, announcing with excitement that these were Rika's best modeling shots. The cheerful blonde girl explained to the serious dark-haired boy that she used to model for fashion magazines and always made self-care a priority. The dark-haired young man asked the blonde girl why she looked different in person, and she snapped back that it definitely wasn't because of makeup. A robotic announcement echoed through the station, informing everyone that the train was now arriving. An urgent voice insisted they needed to leave because the train was arriving, but a frustrated reply protested against changing the subject. A green train raced through the darkness, its speed blurring everything as urgency filled the tunnel. 3 men stood close together on the train as the blonde man nervously whispered to the man in cap about the black-haired man's rumored Yakuza ties. A fearful male passenger whispered that the muscular dark-haired man seemed terrifying, and the female passenger admitted she was too scared to take the train. A blonde girl teased a dark-haired young man about the perks of riding together, while he insisted this felt more like a downside. An encouraging and patient guide pointed at the colorful transit map, urging everyone to slow down and take their time finding the way. A confident dark-haired boy urged the confused blonde girl to follow him, while she insisted she needed more time to memorize the route and questioned their direction. Kim Kuan warned the young girl to hurry or risk being left behind, and she rushed toward him, calling him mean. A hush fell across the starry scene as a distant voice declared that the doors were now opening. A sign for Chitose Funabashi Station glowed overhead as a traveler planning to leave soon announced their stop, and a travel companion expressed thanks. Kim Kuan turned his head, surprised, as someone behind him called out his name with urgency. A cheerful blonde girl waved goodbye from the train, promising she'd see everyone tomorrow as the doors slid shut behind her. A young man with dark hair stood alone on the quiet platform, silently wondering if this would happen again tomorrow. A young man with dark hair clenched his fist and wondered aloud why he was here. Someone cried out, demanding an answer to why this was happening. A bell chimes as sunlight spills across the school clock. Lunchtime begins, with laughter echoing through the halls. A young man with dark hair sits alone on a quiet bench, quietly lamenting that he forgot his bento at home. A hand opens a wooden box, revealing rows of vegetable kimbap neatly arranged inside. A young man about to eat sushi lifts a piece with his chopsticks and calls out softly, "Chopsticks poised." Kim Kuin looked up in surprise as someone called his name from across the room. A cheerful blonde girl stood alone in the parking lot, clutching her purse tightly as someone called out her name for the first time. Rika. A blonde girl with green eyes asked Kim Kuin if he had really been eating by himself every day. An unseen narrator admitted he felt classmates' discomfort when he ate in the classroom, so he preferred eating alone near the recycling area, despite its location. A calm young man with dark hair explained that being alone felt easier, and he reminded her she once said real friends would accept him eventually. He told himself he could wait patiently, certain that someone from outside would know how to take care of themselves. A blonde girl with a flushed face softly told Kim Kuin she believed he wasn't alone anymore. A blonde girl with expressive eyes suddenly gasped, startled by something she had just seen or realized. A hand carefully lifted a wooden box, revealing rows of neatly packed kimbap ready to be shared or enjoyed alone. A blonde girl with expressive eyes exclaimed that she had only seen K-gimbap in dramas and eagerly asked if she could try one. A dark-haired young man hesitated, replying uncertainly to the blonde girl as he glanced up from his box of sushi. The cheerful blonde girl grinned at Kim Kuin, teasing that he shouldn't expect her to cry forever and hoping they'd keep sharing lunch together. A blonde cat-eared girl snapped that she couldn't bring gimbap every day, while a dark-haired boy insisted he wasn't just interested in the food. A dark-haired man picked up a piece of sushi, thinking he'd grown unexpectedly close to Rika and found her far more cheerful than he'd imagined. A dark-haired man lifted his chopsticks and quietly ate his noodles. An enthusiastic blonde girl happily declared that Kim Kuin's family restaurant served authentic Korean barbecue and said the meal tasted absolutely delicious. The blonde girl told the dark-haired man it was just gimbap, thanked him for enjoying it, and asked him to tell his mother she loved it. The blonde girl offered dashimaki tamago to the dark-haired boy, saying it was a thank you for the gimbap. The dark-haired man carefully picked up one piece of food with his chopsticks, quietly agreeing that he would just take a single bite. The dark-haired young man quietly muttered that the food tasted good as he ate with chopsticks, savoring the moment in the calm outdoor setting. A dark-haired man jolted upright, gasping as he realized the taste was far more intense than he expected. Still, the dark-haired man imagined someone declaring that everything tastes better with sugar, then wondered in disbelief if she had poured in the entire bag. The dark-haired man asked the blonde girl how much sugar she used, and she replied she just put in what she thought was reasonable, asking if it tasted sweet. Someone off-screen remarked to Rika that she must really enjoy sugar. The dark-haired young man insisted he couldn't ignore it, warning that eating only sweet things is unhealthy and promising to teach a sugar-free recipe next time. Someone asked what goes in a rolled omelet, another answered salt, and a third reacted in disbelief, saying sweet and savory should be enough. A cheerful blonde girl grinned, teasing Kim Kuin about his unusual food preferences and joking that his taste buds must be numb if he liked such sweet things. Suddenly, blades sliced through the air, making the blonde-haired girl and the dark-haired man look up in surprise, chopsticks frozen mid-bite. A dark-haired man watched from a distance as a calm woman quietly wondered who the pair standing together in the parking lot could be. A girl with long black hair and red ribbons raised a whistle to her lips, startled by someone urgently asking if she was the president. A blonde cat-eared girl focused on her meal as a dark-haired man glanced sideways, noticing a chopstick flying past her. An anxious young woman with shadowed eyes considered whether forbidden relationships at school could ever be excused, admitting that forgiveness might be possible beyond these walls. The student council president slammed her red book shut and announced she would never allow such behavior at school. The dark-haired man looked confused as he questioned what exactly counted as an improper relationship. A pair of feet pressed into the dirt as a suspicious observer wondered aloud if meeting alone for lunch meant something improper. The man with glasses called out Kim Yuzung by name, demanding to know if making excuses was all he could offer. The dark-haired man insisted their relationship wasn't improper, adding that he wasn't making excuses and wondered aloud why they kept seeing each other so frequently. The man with glasses declared his student council status and asked Kim Yusung if he had an issue with their frequent meetings. The blonde girl asked the dark-haired girl if it wasn't strange that they kept running into each other every single lunch break. A dark-haired woman raised her red fan and asked if someone needed something from her. The cheerful blonde girl pointed at the reserved, slightly nervous dark-haired girl and exclaimed that she finally remembered the dark student council president. The dark-haired girl with the red fan gasped and wondered aloud if she was really facing the dark student council president. A cheerful blonde-haired girl with a ponytail laughed and said she understood the rumors about someone in a black uniform after seeing them herself. The reserved, slightly nervous dark-haired girl snapped back at the blonde girl, insisting her outfit showed the dignity of the student council. A supportive voice reassured the blushing girl with long black hair that even if others teased her, her confidence mattered most. A dark-haired girl nervously admitted the students teased her for cosplaying, while a blonde cat-eared girl laughed and offered her a rolled omelet. A blonde girl with green eyes tensed as a red object sped toward her. A determined dark-haired girl glared at the blonde-haired girl and declared she would retreat for now but promised to return. The girl with red fans stormed off in frustration, vowing to take revenge, while the boy with glasses called after her in confusion. Moments later, an unseen student shouted desperately for the blonde girl, drawing the attention of the blonde girl and the serious-looking black-haired man beside her. High above the city, an unknown rooftop figure quietly wondered if they had upset Kim Kuan, and Kim Kuan replied he couldn't say for sure. A clock tower rang out over the rooftops, its chimes echoing through the calm midday air. A dark-haired boy sat alone at his desk, while other students laughed and talked nearby. An alert and attentive young man turned his head in surprise as someone off-panel called out his name. A cheerful blonde girl in a pink cardigan asked what was keeping someone from going home and wondered what they were still doing in the classroom. A brochure lay open on Kim Kuan's desk as someone off-panel asked if he had joined any clubs yet. The cheerful blonde girl invited the dark-haired boy to join her for club trials after school and asked if he was interested. She explained they could visit the clubs, try each one, and decide later, then asked if that sounded better than just sitting and thinking about it. A partially visible person stood up from the table and agreed with Rika that trying the clubs in person was the best idea, then asked where to start. The confident dark-haired young man told the surprised blonde girl he planned to visit every sports club, and she asked why he wanted to try them all. The dark-haired male leaned in with a sly smirk and began to say he had a reason for his choice. The dark-haired man gathered purple energy in his hands and said he wanted to test how far his strength could take him. A bright morning sun washes over the school building, where a bold sign announces the football club and hints at the promise of new beginnings. A dark-haired boy drives his foot into the soccer ball, sending it flying across the indoor court with determined force. The worried goalkeeper watched the soccer ball shoot past him and muttered that someone was terrible. A blonde-haired boy slammed his fist in frustration and told the dark-haired boy he couldn't believe he missed every single shot on goal. The dark-haired boy threatened the others, warning that missing the shot meant trouble, while the red-haired boy snapped back that it wasn't his fault. A gray-haired boy stood near the soccer goal and told the brown-haired boy to watch and learn, boasting that this wasn't even difficult. Two tense men known as the Bone Crusher duo turned sharply as the red-haired man demanded to know who dared to challenge them. A tall and serious-looking player wearing a number 10 jersey appeared before two shocked observers, as one of them gasped in disbelief at his identity. A determined young man with short red hair spoke sternly, telling someone they needed the field and to move out of the way. The narrator declared that the legendary third-year football captain, Ryohei, had arrived, his speed and reputation leaving the anxious students in awe. The gray-haired boy apologized awkwardly, saying they only got carried away playing football and promised they would leave right away. The dark-haired boy thanked the red-haired captain, saying he was glad those troublemakers finally left and that it served them right. The red-haired boy asked the dark-haired boy what he thought of this year's freshman, and the dark-haired boy replied that none had stood out yet. The red-haired man muttered that the club was short on talent and worried he might not get the chance to win the national championship this year. Sunlight flooded the school building as someone wished out loud for a strong recruit, saying everything would change if only one joined. A young man with dark hair clenched his teeth and thought that the more he dwelled on things, the angrier he became. The blonde-haired boy said he wanted to go back and deal with someone right now, but the dark-haired boy told him to handle it alone. The blonde-haired boy taunted the young man with dark hair, daring him to challenge the soccer captain and warning about Ryohei's dangerous kicks. A blonde-haired boy tapped the taller man's shoulder and said experience mattered more than strength, warning that anyone caught by his fist would regret it. A tense young man with spiked orange hair snapped that someone had bumped into him and told them to watch where they were going. A dark-haired young man stared upward, his voice cracking as he demanded to know what was happening. A serious dark-haired character narrowed their eye and asked the other person to repeat what they had just said. Two terrified men screamed that Kim Yu-sung, the successor of assassination arts, had arrived and told everyone to run if they wanted to survive. A shocked dark-haired man turned to the curious blonde woman, asking what was happening and what this talk of a successor even meant. One bystander whispered to the others that Kim Yu-sung had intimidated the thugs with nothing more than a piercing glare. Outside the school building, a blonde girl confronted Kim Yu-sung and insisted he shouldn't pick fights if he truly wanted to get along with others. An assertive and opinionated girl firmly told the taken aback, unassertive boy that even looking at people could be considered rude. Someone admitted it was difficult. A focused dark-haired boy holds the soccer ball and points toward the cluster of balls lined up near the goal. A young male soccer player turned his head, surprised, and quietly wondered what had just happened. An enthusiastic blonde girl suggested to Kim Yu-sung that they start with the soccer club since it was close, wondering aloud why he was there. The blonde-haired thug told the dark-haired boy they would crush the football club, while the blue-haired thug warned him about their powerful boss. A firm hand seized the unsure and startled young man's shoulder, making him tense and glance back in alarm. Ryohei calmly placed his hand on the dark-haired boy's shoulder, telling him to relax because it wasn't worth getting worked up about. A nervous young man stood frozen on the field, whispering that Kim Yu-sung was infamous and couldn't possibly be joining the soccer club. A red-haired man spoke skeptically, saying he'd also heard the bad rumors, but could now judge for himself after seeing the person in question. A serious dark-haired young man with a strong physique gave off an intense presence, while someone quietly speculated that he must have a hidden motive. Dust scattered as a determined and ready-to-act figure stepped firmly onto the ground. A red-haired boy asked if he was Kim Yu-sung and said he'd heard quite a bit about him. Ryohei, the football club captain, welcomed the newcomer and asked what brought him to the club. The black-haired young man said he was there for a club trial and asked what he should do next. The red-haired boy stared upward, thinking he felt impossibly short despite there being barely any difference in height. Someone marveled that the muscular man's physique was so overwhelming. Even his clothes couldn't hide how impressive he looked. A young man with red hair lifts the trophy in celebration as the dark-haired young man stands beside him, wearing a smug grin. Someone declared they wanted the serious young man with dark hair on their team. Someone shouted desperately that they absolutely needed to have him on their side. A young man with dark hair asked if the red-haired boy was okay and offered to guide him through the entrance test. An unseen player steadied their boot beside the soccer ball, pausing for a moment before making the first move. A man in a black suit told everyone they just needed to stand at the penalty line and kick the ball hard into the goal with one chance. A young man with dark hair steadied his breath, telling himself he had to give it everything since there was only one shot. The young man with dark hair clenched his fists, declaring with fierce determination that he was going all out. A blurred, glowing purple figure powered through a deep squat, shouting about powerlifting and squats with electrifying intensity. Kim Yu-sung grimaced as he channeled a surge of energy, shouting that he was lifting 300 kilograms. Kim Yu-sung launched himself into the air and unleashed a powerful kick, sending the soccer ball flying as purple energy swirled around him. A dark-haired man unleashed a furious shout as he hurled a massive blast of purple energy straight ahead. Everyone on the field froze as the player with wide eyes and open mouth gasped, stunned by what had just happened. One speechful teammate, impressed and amazed, said he couldn't even see the ball and called it an incredible shot, leaving both players stunned. Silence settled over the field as the empty soccer goal stood wide open, and someone announced that the goal was completely unguarded. An anxious and surprised young man shouted that something strange had just caught his eye. A dark-haired man stared at the popped soccer ball, wondering aloud how anyone could possibly have the strength to destroy it like that. A dark-haired boy told the blonde girl that football was out, then asked what other sports clubs were available, and she replied that baseball and basketball were nearby. A tall man in a black suit told the cheerful blonde girl they should visit the basketball club first, while a red-haired boy watched in disbelief at their plan. Someone whispered that Kim Yoo-sung was heading for the basketball club, and another quickly wondered if he meant to dominate every sports team. Two young men rushed ahead, saying they couldn't miss Kim Yoo-sung's next club appearance, while a purple-haired girl stayed behind, visibly worried. A determined girl with long dark hair clenched her fist and wondered aloud if Kim Yoo-sung was finally making his move. A spotlight cut through the gym as a black-haired young man soared upward, slamming the basketball through the hoop with raw determination. Then, a young man with dark hair shouted to the bald boy that the backboard had just broken. The terrified young man cried out in panic as the dark-haired man swung a glowing weapon toward him. Two shocked and fearful bystanders demanded to know how the powerful man with a purple aura could create such a massive hole and display so much strength. Someone circled several sports clubs on a list with bright red hearts. An energetic blonde girl cheered over her notepad, thrilled by her discovery, while a young man with dark hair stood quietly beside her. The young man with dark hair looked down and asked the blonde girl named Rika how many sports clubs were left. The blonde girl with green eyes smirked and teased that he seemed curious about the answer. A hand lifted a pair of red glasses toward the blue sky, pausing in a moment of quiet reflection. The confident blonde girl adjusted her glasses and explained that she would answer using information she had gathered from the bingo card. The black-haired young man glanced around, uncertain what was happening. The narrator explained that only 3 school clubs still had trials today, since table tennis, volleyball, and judo were excluded from the list. 3 girls sprinted around the track, with an energetic cat-eared girl pulling ahead of her struggling teammates. A cheerful girl with a pink swim cap invited everyone to try the swimming club, saying it was perfect for cardio and a full-body workout. A cheerful cat-eared girl tapped a nervous boy on the head with a bamboo sword, then explained the kendo club focused on etiquette and mental discipline. A blonde girl with red glasses told everyone there were 3 sports clubs they could choose to enroll in. A blonde girl stood in the hallway, confidently telling a dark-haired man her explanation was flawless while he thanked her and wondered about the sudden glasses. A serious young man with dark hair stayed quiet while the cheerful blonde girl offered to guide him anywhere he wanted to go. Someone asked the blonde girl with green eyes if she had started acting in addition to modeling, leaving her blushing and surprised by the sudden question. The nervous blonde girl clutched her book and told the young man with dark hair that he seemed talented, but quickly tried to dismiss her comment. The blonde girl nervously twirled her hair and admitted she felt embarrassed to talk about it. The blonde girl with green eyes admitted she once did work similar to acting. The young man with dark hair stared ahead in shock, his wide eyes and flushed cheeks revealing a sudden jolt of surprise. The young man with dark hair grew flustered, telling himself not to imagine anything inappropriate, because it might break censorship rules. The blonde girl with green eyes wondered if Rika could really have such a dramatic backstory, debating whether to ask and learn more. A pale hand gripped the dark coat, holding on tight in a moment charged with hesitation. The blonde girl excitedly grabbed the tall man's arm, insisting they stop dwelling on the past, and reminding him they still had 3 clubs left to visit. A young man with dark hair quietly decided not to bring up the sensitive topic, thinking it would only make things awkward between them today. The blonde girl told the young man with dark hair to trust her and follow her lead as she led him toward the kendo club. A tense silence settled as the group of uniformed students waited in front of the closed double doors, sunlight streaming across their anxious faces. Suddenly, a blond young man in a black uniform snapped his attention up from his phone when someone shouted that he had arrived. The determined young man with dark hair squared his shoulders, ready to face whatever threat the swirling purple energy promised. A surge of tension filled the air as someone shouted that Kim Yoo-sung had just appeared at the kendo club. A tall, Imposing dark-haired boy strode through the crowd while nervous students whispered that he'd already destroyed several clubs and looked even scarier up close. The assertive girl pressed the nervous girl with the microphone, demanding to know why she was hesitating and if she still planned to interview Kim Yoo-sung. The confident girl with cat ears calmly told the shocked brown-haired girl that she was Yoo-sung's manager and all interview requests should go through her. A door creaked open and a mysterious figure announced that the newcomer had finally arrived. The dark-haired young man's eyes widened slightly as he noticed something unexpected. The dark-haired woman gripped her shirt and told someone she knew they wrecked sports clubs under the guise of club trials. But things would be different now. The dark-haired young man watched closely as an object landed suddenly near him. A determined young woman with long purple hair stepped forward and declared that the rampage would end now. A confident girl named Yukika leveled her weapon at the calm dark-haired boy while the crowd cheered her on, shouting their support and admiration. The young man with dark hair stated he was interested in the Kendo Club and asked how to sign up for the trials. The purple-haired woman told her unseen opponent they had quite the attitude, then agreed to move forward. The girl with purple hair gripped her backpack strap and announced that it would be a one-point match. The purple-haired girl rested her wrapped weapon on her shoulder and told her opponent that the first valid strike would decide the match. An excited young man clenched his fists and shouted that the match between the human weapon and the Kendo captain was finally beginning. A group of enthusiastic fans shouted that they were eager to see the captain defeat Kim Yoo-sung and claimed his reign would end today. A blonde girl with red glasses teased a young man with dark hair, saying people were treating him like he was the villain. A dark-haired girl shouted for everyone to be quiet, her voice cutting through the noise with fierce authority. A wave of surprise swept through the hallway as the group of students reacted in unison to something unexpected. A confident purple-haired woman announced that no one except Kim Yoo-sung and herself would be allowed into the training ground for the duel. The purple-eyed woman warned that if the intruder tried to enter, she would handle them before dealing with Kim Yoo-sung. A nervous young woman whispered for quiet, as she and two uneasy classmates stood frozen in the tense hallway. A blonde girl with red glasses wondered aloud if the captain felt different from the other sports clubs, and the dark-haired boy quietly agreed. He quietly agreed that Rika was right. A determined purple-haired girl gripped her weapon tightly, as an enormous snake loomed behind her, and she told herself this pressure was overwhelming. Someone told Rika to wait while they handled something inside, and Rika replied she'd stay here and wished them good luck. Sunlight spilled across rows of neatly arranged kendo helmets, protective gear, and bamboo swords, filling the quiet room with a peaceful stillness. A determined girl with long dark hair stood firm in the empty dojo and said they would begin whenever he was ready, asking about protective gear. The tall dark-haired man said none of the protective gear fit him, so he'd just go without, and the small purple-haired girl agreed to do the same. The young man gripped his wooden sword and warned that he wouldn't take responsibility if anyone got hurt. The determined girl in a school uniform gripped her weapon tightly and replied that she found his warning amusing. The determined girl with long dark hair raised her wooden weapon and warned Kim Yoo-sung that he wouldn't get near her. Sunlight spilled across silent kendo armor and bamboo swords, filling the empty room with a sense of calm before anything began. Then, a man with black hair and a woman with long black hair crashed their wooden swords together in a sharp, tense clash. The young woman with purple hair blocked an attack from the black-haired man, as someone called him Kim Yoo-sung and noted his surprising skill. The young woman with purple hair lunged forward with her sword, saying her opponent's civilian strength would never match the training of a real martial artist. Still, the dark-haired young man raised his arm and summoned a surge of blue-purple energy. The purple-haired schoolgirl swings her wooden stick hard, and the young man with dark hair blocks her attack in midair. The focused and alert purple-eyed character spotted an opening and thought this was their chance. A determined fighter gripped the sword's hilt, knuckles white, bracing for the next move as tension crackled through the air. The dark-haired girl swung her wooden sword at the young man with dark hair, but it snapped in midair as he blocked the blow. The young man with dark hair stared in disbelief, unable to process what had just happened. The dark-haired girl charged forward and taunted her unseen opponent, mocking that anyone should have seen through such a simple feint. A determined purple-haired girl lunged at the man in black with her weapon, shouting that it would all end with this attack. A determined young man with dark hair spun 3 sticks in the air, his focus unwavering as he extended his hand to control their motion. A sinister man with glowing eyes grinned, and the masked woman gasped in shock at his sudden, menacing presence. A tall dark-haired man swung a wooden sword at a girl with long dark hair as she fell back on the gym floor. A determined girl with long dark hair tightened her grip on the wooden sword, bracing herself as an unseen spirit's wild energy sent a chill through her. The dark-haired young man gripped his bamboo sword, wondering if his opponent was holding back or had planned to counter by switching her grip. The determined young woman with purple hair realized she had underestimated her opponent and thought she might be in danger if the fight continued. Someone off-panel announced they would end the fight with their next attack. A determined dark-haired girl in a school uniform raised her katana, bracing to strike as the giant white snake loomed before her. A surge of energy filled the air as the narrator revealed the clan's forbidden technique, calling it the evil-slaying slash. The determined dark-haired girl lunged at Kim Yuzong, declaring that everything would end here as she swung the motorcycle handlebar. A black-haired young man looked up in surprise and quietly reacted to something unexpected. Rain pours down as the dark-haired boy unleashes a glowing punch, energy crackling around his fist. The dark-haired young man clutched his chest, crying out in pain as a searing burst of light exploded from his body. A confident user of a secret clan technique boasted to Kim Yuzong about unleashing the Fuma clan's hidden move. A determined young woman with black hair and a ponytail charged forward, declaring that no opponent in training had ever survived this strike, and his villainy was over. A confident young woman with a baton landed a forceful punch on a long dark-haired girl, who gasped in shock. A spinning shuriken strikes a blindfolded girl in a school uniform, and she immediately swings her partially broken wooden sword in response. A young man with dark hair gripped his shurnai tighter, suddenly realizing he might have missed something important. A muscular young man pulled back his shirt and realized aloud that the strange sensation was actually his new muscle armor. Someone off-panel spat out an insult, calling their opponent a muscle-bound freak. Someone in the hallway excitedly shared that Kim Yuzong had defeated every sports club the previous day. A blonde girl leaned in to whisper that the kendo club suffered the most, and Yukika Sunbi was now in the hospital. 2 students whispered that everything had been done to take over the school and wondered if Kim Yuzong was now the new top rank. A dark-haired young man glanced sideways, quietly admitting he hadn't expected rumors about his surprising strength to spread so quickly after trying out the clubs. A blonde young man insisted Yuzong wasn't like the rumors said, then pointed out Ruji was acting the same as always since he was the protagonist. A blonde girl greeted a dark-haired boy, while he quietly decided that living as an extra and letting Ruji have his own life was just fine. Suddenly, a hand shoved the door open with force, breaking the uneasy calm. A red-haired girl shouted furiously, demanding that Sakamoto Ruji come out right now. The curious brown-haired boy and dark-haired boy wondered aloud who the newcomer was, while someone identified her as Tojo Karen from the Kendo Club. The blonde-haired young man calmly asked why someone was looking for him and if something was wrong. The red-haired girl accused the blonde boy of harassing younger students and said she had visited them in the hospital to hear their stories. The blonde-haired boy insisted there was a misunderstanding, but the red-haired boy snapped back that beating up his juniors was no small thing. A serious dark-haired young man looks up as the surprised blonde girl stands beside him, unsure how to respond. The determined brown-haired girl rushed forward, insisting she needed to explain, while the surprised blonde-haired boy demanded to know who she was. The brown-haired girl stepped forward, insisting the red-haired person's freshmen were at fault, while the red-haired person asked what she meant. The worried red-haired character quietly explained that Kendo Club students tried to force them into an alley yesterday, and only Ruji's help got them out. The angry girl demanded to know if the red-haired boy still blamed Ruji after learning the truth. The brown-haired girl told the red-haired boy to go discipline his freshmen, and he realized Sakamoto wasn't actually to blame. The brown-haired girl, eyes sharp, insisted it wasn't Ruji and clarified that the real culprits were actually the Kendo Club freshmen. The red-haired character shouted fiercely, insisting they were ready to take action. The red-haired young man pointed at Sakamoto Ruji and demanded that he become his man. Someone shouted a passionate vow, promising to make another the happiest man alive. The blond young man stared in shock as someone in front of him flipped him off, asking what was happening. A shocked and confused girl blurted out that she had no idea what was going on. The red-haired girl seized the anxious blond boy's wrist, and the crowd of onlookers froze in stunned silence. The girl with a green-patterned headband shouted that she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Still, the dark-haired young man braced himself, thinking how terrifying it was to face a confession attack in the middle of a rom-com war. A blonde girl with green eyes shrieked with excitement. Someone in the crowd called out, praising Tojo Karen and saying how cool she was. Classroom chatter swelled as a boy with green hair asked everyone who they thought Sakamoto would pick. A playful and flirtatious youth suggested Yaguchi would be a better choice, praising her friendly nature and hinting he liked her appearance too. A brown-haired man grinned and told the red-haired boy that his girlfriend acted tough with others, but was gentle just for him. A dark-haired boy listened as classmates joked about the earlier chaos, realizing that rumors about the morning's events were spreading through the room. A bold red-haired girl suddenly asked the blonde-haired boy to be her man, leaving him stunned as the others watched in tense silence. A blonde girl called out a cheerful greeting, making the dark-haired boy beside her turn in surprise and respond with a questioning sound. The blonde girl leaned forward and asked who the unseen listener thought Sakamoto would end up with. The dark-haired boy shrugged and admitted he didn't know, while the blonde girl complained that he was no fun. A black-haired man in the foreground quietly considered that, if the story played out like the original, the boy would end up with his childhood friend. A knowing and teasing boy said he already knew who Sakamoto would date, leaving a shocked and surprised boy speechless. A playful blonde girl winked and confidently announced that Sakamoto was going to start dating Tojo. A playful blonde girl declared that she would help only if the distressed dark-haired boy agreed to let her give him relationship advice. The dark-haired boy told the blonde girl he was sure of his counseling abilities, and she responded that she was an expert when it came to love advice. The playful blonde girl bragged that everyone wanted her guidance, but the uneasy dark-haired boy pointed out she wasn't even known by the person in question. The blonde girl muttered that she could help if asked, growing frustrated that she was the only one getting so worked up about it. The blonde girl wished out loud that someone would ask her for advice, while the dark-haired boy watched her with confusion. Sunlight washed over the stately white building as the clock on its facade marked the quiet start of another ordinary school day. A hand slammed the pole with sudden force, breaking the silence beneath the bright sky. The dark-haired young man stared ahead, suddenly realizing something as he wondered aloud if what he saw could really be true. A dark-haired boy stepped into the classroom and, spotting the red-haired girl, called out with surprise, asking if she was Tojo. A dark-haired boy asked Satoru what Tojo was doing in their classroom, and Satoru explained she was pestering Sakamoto to hang out this weekend. A young red-haired individual looked down thoughtfully, recalling that she wanted to treat him to a meal as an apology. A dark-haired boy nervously asked if sharing a meal on the weekend meant it was a date, and the blonde boy calmly confirmed it did. A black-haired young man whispered that he'd heard a rumor about someone being the daughter of a very powerful figure. A serious scarred man stood before a determined red-haired youth and revealed that Karen Tojo is the daughter of the Dongxiang clan's boss. The brown-haired man quietly told the black-haired man that the Dongxiang clan is a powerful group controlling all of Kanto. A reserved, skeptical dark-haired boy told an uneasy, doubtful brown-haired boy that he was surprised and doubted the story he'd just heard. The brown-haired young man admitted he still felt uncertain, saying the woman hadn't done anything to them, so it shouldn't be a problem. An earnest light-haired boy told a dark-haired man he wanted to start calling him Hyung, but the dark-haired man quickly rejected the idea as creepy. A young man with dark hair suddenly realized he might be inside a romantic comedy manga and wondered if anything could happen next. A determined red-haired girl whipped around and urgently shouted Sakamoto's name, then wondered aloud if Tojo might actually be the daughter of a Yakuza boss. A determined red-haired girl demanded to know why the nervous blonde boy still hadn't accepted her weekend invitation, insisting she needed to apologize properly. He hesitated, unsure how to respond. The narrator quietly admitted the protagonist was getting involved instead, and decided it made no difference to them. The brown-haired girl pleaded with the red-haired boy to stop, insisting he was making someone uncomfortable and should mind his own business. Three boys wailed about Sakamoto's luck with girls, while a dark-haired boy sat nearby, quietly wondering why everyone envied that attention so much. The narrator explained that Tojo's pursuit kept going after that. A red-haired girl burst into the classroom, while the man at the desk shouted for Sakamoto to accept the invitation before class ended. An angry red-haired girl kicked open the locker room door and demanded to know if someone was hiding inside. An assertive and energetic red-haired girl shouted from the doorway, telling Sakamoto he was having a meal with her this weekend. An exasperated blonde young man pleaded with Sakamoto to finally stop his antics. A blonde girl approached a calm, slightly reserved young man and asked what he was planning to do for Golden Week. The dark-haired boy replied that he planned to help at his family's restaurant instead of making any special plans during Golden Week. The blonde girl asked the black-haired boy if he wanted to visit her place, and he repeated her words in surprise. The dark-haired boy sounded surprised as he asked if she liked manga and mentioned that he had a huge collection at home. The blonde girl told the dark-haired boy her father's manga collection would amaze him, and he asked in disbelief if her dad really owned that many. The dark-haired boy promised to call the blonde girl when he was free, and she said she would tell her papa ahead of time. Suddenly, the blonde girl holding a rice ball sneezed, and the dark-haired boy's eyes widened in surprise. A dark-haired man eating at the table commented to the blonde girl named Rika that she eats a lot despite being thin, and she responded with surprise. Rika explained she needs a big lunch or she'll just snack later, adding she doesn't gain weight easily. The blonde girl laughed and claimed that everything she eats goes straight to her chest, leaving the dark-haired man stunned. The blonde girl shouted at the flustered dark-haired man, accusing him of being a pervert, while he frantically insisted it was all a setup. The blonde girl laughed mockingly and let out a giggle, directing it at the blurred boy in front of her. A green-eyed character stared ahead, their shock unmistakable as realization hit. The blonde girl suddenly called out Tojo's name, startling the black-haired boy and red-haired boy at the cafeteria table. The blonde girl shoved the black-haired boy aside, and he nervously called out that this was his chance to speak. A serious red-haired character leaned in, asking if the person off-panel was Karen Tojo. The red-haired boy asked who the two standing behind him were, and Rika Kishimoto introduced herself calmly in response. Kishimoto, a cheerful blonde girl, stepped forward and offered to help the red-haired boy, who recognized her name and reacted with amazement. Rika Kishimoto teased the embarrassed red-haired girl, asking if there was some kind of relationship involved. The nervous red-haired girl blurted out that she heard Rika Kishimoto was an expert on love and needed relationship advice. A young man with dark hair blurted out that the rumors he'd heard were actually true. The blonde girl told the nervous red-haired girl it was obvious she always visited their class searching for Sakamoto, so nobody could miss it. A forceful red-haired girl clamped her hand over the blonde girl's mouth, warning her in a hushed voice that everyone could hear them. A playful, sociable student with blonde hair tried to say she wanted advice, just as an unknown figure covered her mouth. A red-haired girl blushed as she nervously admitted she was about to give relationship advice. A concerned dark-haired young man walked alone through the city at sunset, thinking to himself that Kishimoto seemed to be enjoying all this far too much. The blonde girl declared they'd all meet after school to talk, while the dark-haired boy asked if he was included, and the red-haired boy agreed. A contemplative and observant man with a bag looked up at the gym, reflecting that the story's love rivals were supposed to compete, not help. The dark-haired young man gripped the workout bars, telling himself there was no point in overthinking and he should just focus on training. A muscular man lifted heavy dumbbells while a black-haired man watched, muttering in disbelief at the intensity of the workout. A woman with blue hair called out to Ryu Song Kim, asking why everyone was training so hard and if something special was happening today. A dark-haired young man looked up, surprised, and said he hadn't expected to run into this person here. A serious, athletic young woman stood facing forward, her gaze steady as she called out the names Yukika and Fuma with quiet determination. A surprised dark-haired man freezes as a black-haired woman with a red ribbon calls out, asking if he is Fuma Yukika. A calm, thoughtful dark-haired girl quietly admitted that club activities alone weren't enough exercise, adding she hadn't expected to see the listener here as well. A dark-haired man smirked, saying he understood why the other guys around him suddenly seemed so motivated. A confident, fit woman with long dark hair wondered aloud what she should begin with, remarking to herself that the other woman was quite beautiful. A dark-haired man with a bag told the thoughtful dark-haired woman he hadn't realized she lived nearby, and she replied she had just moved. A dark-haired young man reacted with surprise. Then someone referred to him as director, catching him off guard. Nakayama Yujiro, the friendly and supportive director, smiled warmly as he told Kim to start showing Miss Fuma the ropes from now on. The older man threw his arm around the young, determined man and told the surprised purple-haired woman it would be easier between schoolmates. The older man leaned in to whisper that he believed a girl had come here because she liked the surprised dark-haired man, wishing him luck. The experienced and confident older man told the new and uncertain young man to just watch since it was his first day, thinking he misunderstood the situation. A black-haired young man, a gray-haired older man, and a black-haired young woman with red headbands stared at the barbell loaded with heavy weights. The older man smiled and announced they would start with 220 kilograms, while the young woman reacted in disbelief at the heavy weight. The experienced industry veteran reassured the young lady, saying he had never seen anyone like the muscular young man in all his years. Moments later, an anonymous hand gripped the white rod with fierce determination. A strong and physically powerful figure drove their thigh forward, the impact sending shockwaves through the air. A young man performed a powerful overhead squat with the heavy barbell, while a shocked purple-haired woman let out a startled gasp. The older man encouraged Kim to take on a heavier challenge, telling him to bump the weight up to 270 kilograms, and Kim agreed without hesitation. An exhausted but accomplished young man catches his breath, while the dark-haired woman quietly admits she can't believe he managed 5 full sets. The older man gave a proud thumbs up, saying he told everyone Kim was a monster and marveling at his strength, while the dark-haired woman voiced concern. A serious dark-haired girl with purple eyes watched intently, admitting to herself that she was witnessing the rumored legendary anomaly for the first time. A muscular young man stands firm as purple flames erupt around him, convinced that only the extreme yang physique could explain what he's witnessing. A young man with dark hair stood in shadow, radiating intense purple energy as he declared that his body possessed the extreme yang physique. Ominous words filled the darkness, describing a constitution said to hold the vitality of 100 men. Legend speaks of legendary warriors, each with an extreme yang physique, as a muscular blindfolded hero stands before epic battles raging in the background. A determined girl lunged at a confident man with her knife, while he explained that extraordinary power couldn't come from ordinary training alone. A dark-haired woman stared ahead, her eyes filled with worry as tension lingered in the air. Someone quietly decided it was time to report this to a certain person. Sunlight streamed across the quiet wooden house, filling the scene with a calm warmth. A red-haired girl strode forward with a tall black-haired man and a cheerful blonde girl as men bowed and welcomed her home. A dark-haired young man, sweating and tense, wondered if Tojo's family was really Yakuza and why Kishimoto didn't seem surprised. A man with a mustache and scar looked uneasy, thinking he'd never get used to this strange new world he'd been thrown into. A tall dark-haired man radiated menace as a shocked man blurted out his disbelief at the newcomer's enormous size. An aggressive man in a white shirt accused the dark-haired man of being a spy and warned the red-haired young lady to stay back. The small red-haired girl snapped that her 2 supporters had come to help, insisting the angry man was wrong about their appearance and intentions. A serious dark-haired man stood against swirling purple, quietly insisting he hadn't done anything wrong. Sunlight warmed the empty kitchen as an unseen voice apologized for their men's behavior. A dark-haired man awkwardly scratched the back of his head, quietly telling the red-haired person that he was used to being misunderstood and it was fine. A dark-haired man scratched his head and admitted he didn't feel qualified to give relationship advice, while the blonde woman insisted his input was exactly what they needed. The blonde girl encouraged the red-haired girl to begin cooking, saying nothing worked better than a homemade meal to show someone how you feel. A confident blonde girl struck a dramatic pose and announced she was Kishimoto Rika, the love expert, while the boys reacted with disbelief and discomfort. Kishimoto Rika called everyone to attention, declaring it was time to cook, and the group raised their hands, shouting that they were ready. A wall clock ticked toward 5:25 as someone nearby let out a relieved breath. A red-haired girl excitedly held up a perfectly arranged bento box and said she couldn't believe it was finally finished. A burst of radiant light filled the room, scattering sparkles everywhere and turning the moment bright and magical. The red-haired girl proudly presented her handmade bento, and the blonde girl clapped while praising her for doing a great job. A cheerful blonde girl urgently warned the red-haired boy and the dark-haired boy to be careful with the heat, while the red-haired boy wondered if high heat was best. The red-haired boy stared at the burnt, twisted nether carriage, while the dark-haired man admitted that rom-com cooking was tougher than expected. A considerate man in an apron told the blonde woman and the red-haired woman that smelling the food made him hungry and offered to cook dinner for Kim. A determined young man with black hair looked back and said he would take care of it. A determined cook stirred the pot with quick, practiced movements as flames roared around the bubbling food. A young man with dark hair fiercely stirs the flaming wok, while two apron-wearing onlookers gasp in surprise. A pleased cook announced the meal was finished, and an excited onlooker exclaimed how delicious the steaming plate of rice looked. The red-haired girl eagerly told the blonde girl that the food tasted incredible as they both started eating their rice dishes. A muscular, dark-haired young man set plates on the table as a curious blonde girl asked when he had learned to cook, and he quietly answered that it started in his freshman year. During his first semester, a muscular, dark-haired young man remembered how his mother would wake at dawn to cook for him, and how guilty he felt watching her. A muscular, dark-haired young man carefully cooked with chopsticks over a flaming pan, mentioning he struggled at first but eventually learned how to manage it. An emotional, touched chibi girl exclaimed that making lunch for your hard-working mother was truly heartwarming. A cheerful blonde girl raised her hand and said her mother makes her lunch with love, while a black-haired man teased her about being a filial daughter. A cheerful blonde girl suddenly remembered that Kishimoto Rika had feelings for Tojo-chan, while a red-haired boy looked surprised and asked if it was for him. A generous hand offered a gift-wrapped box to Tojo-chan, saying it contained everything she would need from yesterday's trip to the cosmetics store. The cheerful blonde girl handed a small gift box to the shy red-haired boy, telling him she wrote down a skincare routine for him to follow. The cheerful blonde girl suggested to the red-haired girl that after learning makeup and landing her date, they could go shopping for clothes together. The red-haired girl nervously wondered if she had to buy new clothes too. The blonde girl hesitated, then admitted she'd only seen the red-haired girl at school and thought her usual style needed some work. The blonde girl laughed and teased the red-haired girl, while the red-haired girl snapped back that her outfit looked like something an old man would wear. A black-haired boy smirked nervously, thinking he would give his best on makeup today and make sure he secured that date. A cheerful blonde girl with a ponytail encouraged Tojo-chan, saying it was time for makeup and asking Ryu-chan to wait nearby. The cheerful blonde girl pointed at the dark-haired boy, telling him he should wait outside because watching a woman's transformation would be inappropriate. The cheerful blonde girl urged the shy red-haired boy to follow her, and he stammered a nervous agreement while holding tightly to his gift bag. A young black-haired boy stood frozen, trying to make sense of why someone had said a man's opinion mattered here. A blue-haired man strolled beneath a glowing street lamp, quietly admitting to himself that the recent experience had turned out to be surprisingly enjoyable. A confident dark-haired young man listened as the cheerful blonde girl said she hoped Tojo would manage to get that date. A dark-haired boy noticed something near Salon Station, and the blonde girl reacted, both sounding surprised as they exchanged brief words. A dark-haired man asked if they could swing by the convenience store, and the blonde girl excitedly chimed in that she wanted to go too. A hand lifted a colorful comic book, drawing focus to the playful characters on its cover against a backdrop of blurred shelves. The cheerful manga lover told the reserved, attentive boy she buys the same manga every week and her father trusts manga fans. The cheerful, blonde girl teased the reserved, dark-haired boy about his weekly purchase, and he admitted he does the same, prompting her to joke about being good people. The blonde girl, holding her red book, said she was sure he was a good person, and sounded a bit surprised by her own words. The black-haired young man said he believed anyone who spends all day supporting Tojo is already doing something admirable for someone else. The cheerful, blonde girl blushed deeply, feeling unexpectedly moved by what she had just heard. Still, the blonde girl stammered uncertainly while the dark-haired boy watched her with curiosity. Then, the blonde girl announced she would pay and leave first, wishing everyone well as the dark-haired boy silently watched her rush out. A dark-haired young man looked off to the side, suddenly sounding worried as he wondered aloud if Rika might have done something unexpected. Someone wondered aloud if the feeling was just a sudden urge to poop. The next morning, sunlight poured over the quiet school building as the new day began. Two boys in school uniforms turned their heads, both suddenly surprised by something happening just out of sight in the hallway. A red-haired girl in a school uniform walked past, and the brown-haired boy told his friend he thought she was really cute. A red-haired girl with a yellow ribbon wondered aloud if there had always been another girl like that at their school. One student whispered that she was heading into Class 2B, then another asked in disbelief if that could really be who he thought it was. Someone gripped a sealed envelope tightly, tension rising as the wax seal pressed hard against their palm. A confident girl handed a folded letter to a blonde-haired boy, telling Sakamoto it was a challenge and that he had plans with her this weekend. A red-haired girl in a school uniform touched her face, demanding to know why she was being stared at and who the other person thought she was. Morning sun washes over a peaceful plaza, the city alive but gentle. Shibuya waits, quietly expectant. The blonde girl excitedly told everyone that Tojo's confession at school was wild, and then Tojo quietly asked to be called Karen from now on. The blonde girl asked the dark-haired boy if she could call him Rika, and suggested he call her Karen too. A dark-haired young man stood before racks of women's clothing, quietly admitting this was unfamiliar territory and he had never needed to come here before. A cheerful blonde girl turned to a dark-haired boy and insisted he was part of the team when he wondered if he was coming along again. An enthusiastic admirer gushed that the outfit in the store window looked adorable. An energetic blonde girl tugged a red-haired girl along the sidewalk, urging her to hurry so they could try on more outfits. A red-haired girl clutched clothes nervously as someone tossed more her way, saying she liked both of them. The energetic blonde girl pushed the startled red-haired girl forward, insisting she go change, while the red-haired girl protested in confusion. The blonde girl declared that cute styles didn't suit her and told the dark-haired boy she would step in, asking him to wait. The blonde girl grabbed the nervous red-haired girl's shoulders and told her to stay still so she could handle everything. A confused dark-haired man stood outside, wondering aloud what could possibly be happening in the next room as urgent voices pleaded to be gentle. An anxious girl clenched her trembling fists, whispering that she couldn't believe what she was seeing. The shy red-haired girl muttered that her skirt felt far too short, while the blonde girl laughed at her discomfort. The supportive blonde girl asked for an opinion, and the kind black-haired boy told the shy red-haired girl that it suited her. A red-haired woman adjusted her ribbon and quietly admitted she never expected Tojo could look so different just from a change of clothes. Clouds drifted gently above the elegant mansion roof, sunlight glinting off the tiles as the estate stood quiet and serene. A stern man with red hair and glasses sat at the head of the table, commanding the group as 6 subordinates bowed toward him under the spotlight. A focused man with red hair and glasses clasped a cane, gazing forward with calm intensity as a title announced him as Dongxiangho's 6th chairman, Tojo Naoto. A serious and intense figure called Bloodbath, Naoto clasped his hands, considering Karen and noting her situation aloud. A determined and forceful hand slammed a large blade into the ground as the narrator remarked that someone had finally found a boy she liked. A group of tense men faced a red-haired man from behind, demanding to know who would dare involve their lady Karen and speculating about the intruder. The red-haired man declared he wouldn't let just anyone date his daughter, and Sento quickly acknowledged the order with a respectful, "Yes, sir." A man with glasses calmly confirmed to the red-haired man that the boy Karen likes is named Sakamoto. The narrator explained that his name is Sakamoto Ruji and that he attends Ichijo Private Academy with the young lady. A considerate and protective escort explained he took the young lady to a hair salon because she said she wanted to visit one for the first time. A worried hand displayed a smartphone with multiple credit card charges, while the speaker reported that new transactions had appeared today, all from clothing stores. The narrator revealed that, according to the gathered information, the young lady is secretly planning a date with Sakamoto Ruji this weekend. A bespectacled character reacted with intense focus, sweat beading on his face as he processed the news about the upcoming date. The red-haired man slammed his fist into the ground and shouted furiously, while worried subordinates urged him to calm down and addressed him as chairman. The red-haired man commanded everyone with free time this weekend to assemble, his voice sharp and determined against the dark red backdrop. The red-haired man, gripping a knife, told his group to follow Karen's date and warned them to keep an eye on Sakamoto. A resolute man clenched his fist and loudly affirmed his readiness to act, while those nearby watched him with tense anticipation. The narration urgently calls for all top executives and Tojo Naoto, the sixth chairman of Dongxiangho, to assemble immediately. A row of shiny kitchen appliances glinted beneath a bright sign, the scene calm and orderly after the previous rush of urgent orders. 2 burgers and fries sat untouched as the exhausted blonde girl muttered that she was completely worn out. The blonde girl admitted she was too tired to chew, while the red-haired character pointed out she was managing to eat anyway. Rika thanked the blonde girl and the dark-haired boy for everything, and the blonde girl told her that's what friends are for. The blonde girl smiled at Tojo Karen, saying she loved shopping and appreciated how Karen was always there to help her. A red-haired woman with a yellow ribbon focused her gaze, determination sharpening in her single visible eye. A dark-haired young man held his burger mid-bite as a red-haired girl urged him to eat more, but he insisted he preferred rice. The red-haired girl with a bow quietly told him she was grateful and offered more help if he needed it. Kim Yusung chewed his burger and admitted to himself that the girl he once dismissed was more thoughtful than he expected. The black-haired boy told the nervous red-haired girl she had ketchup on her face, making her glance away as the blonde girl kept eating in silence. The dark-haired boy laughed and told the red-haired girl he was only joking, then asked if Karen had planned her date route yet. The red-haired girl raised her finger and calmly explained they would visit a cafe for tea, see a movie, and then have dinner together. The angry blonde girl shouted that the red-haired boy was being too naive, leaving him confused as he turned to her in surprise. The blonde girl insisted you can't win someone's heart by doing what everyone else does, then suggested trying the fast food restaurant instead of a typical movie date. A red-haired girl stared at her phone and blurted out in surprise that it looked like an aquarium. The blonde girl beamed as she pointed out the shimmering waves and colorful fish, telling everyone how peaceful and beautiful the aquarium looked. Someone explained that even the dim indoor lighting and quiet conversations help feelings between 2 people grow deeper. The blonde girl turned to Tojo Karen, insisting she could trust Rika's romance advice, and Karen eagerly agreed, while the dark-haired boy muttered his doubts. The city glowed beneath a sunset sky, its modern buildings standing quiet as everything slowed for a single, golden moment. A tall dark-haired man praised Karen for her efforts, wishing her luck for tomorrow as she waved happily beside him. A girl in a school uniform waved from across the plaza, telling the 2 students to get home safely and saying goodbye. The blonde girl raised her hand with a bright smile, and the dark-haired boy, looking surprised, matched her gesture. The blonde girl cheerfully asked the dark-haired boy about his plans for tomorrow, and he replied that he would probably just stay home and read manga. The energetic blonde girl urged the dark-haired boy to join her in tailing Karen, and he protested that he deserved to enjoy his own weekend. The fiery-eyed girl insisted they had to help Karen for her happiness, while the black-haired boy sighed and wondered if she was just meddling. The blonde girl high-fived the dark-haired boy, cheering that this was the spirit she wanted to see from him. A burst of color and sparkles filled the air as Kishimoto Rika and Kim Yusung announced that they had formed a combo. Sunset colors spill across the city skyline, quieting the energy and excitement from before. Still, a brown-haired girl, a black-haired girl, a brown-haired boy, and a dark green-haired girl glance anxiously over their shoulders as the sun sets. A scarred and mysterious figure in a red cloak scanned the area, while a curious child pointed and asked her mother about his unusual hair. A confident red-haired man stood at the front of his serious group and declared this would be the place for his daughter Karen's first date. A quiet city stretches beneath a sky of drifting clouds, inviting the promise of new stories and hidden tension. A blonde-haired man called out urgently to Tojo as she stood on the sidewalk, holding a purple box. The blonde-haired young man apologized to Tojo and asked if she had been waiting long. Tojo smiled warmly and reassured him that she had just arrived, telling him not to worry about making her wait. A red-haired girl nervously held out a purple gift box, glancing up at the blonde boy, who looked surprised and blushed. The blonde boy told the red-haired girl she looked great in her new clothes. The red-haired girl thanked the blonde boy as they walked side by side outdoors. The red-haired girl quietly suggested they grab some tea and plan their day, and the blonde boy agreed without hesitation. Moments later, the red-haired girl urged the blonde boy to follow her lead, while he offered to carry a purple box as the hooded figure watched silently. A dark-haired boy and a blonde girl in disguise peeked from behind a wall, and he wondered aloud if their special training was finally paying off. A young woman with a hat and mask sprinted ahead, while a young man in a hoodie shouted that they should meet up and begged her to wait. Still, a red-haired girl told the blonde boy that the cafe was famous, and he replied that it looked nice as they walked past. A red-haired character with clenched teeth growled under his breath, furious and muttering about wanting payback against someone who had wronged him. A furious red-haired man slammed his fist down and yelled that no one should make his daughter wait, while a nervous subordinate begged him to calm down. A man with curly hair warned the chairman that people were starting to get suspicious, and the chairman blurted out that their disguises should have been perfect. A man with curly hair pointed at the board and explained they needed to split into pairs, since 9 people together were drawing too much attention. A red-haired woman took charge, ordering the group to follow Sinto's plan and move out in pairs, while a black-suited man affirmed the command. A row of coffee machines and blenders sat quietly behind the empty cafe counter, the blue wall sign catching a soft light in the calm. A towering dessert parfait overflowed with whipped cream and chocolate, drawing an odd reaction from someone nearby. A blonde girl with a blue hat snapped photos of the giant strawberry parfait, while someone off-panel wondered if she could really finish it alone. A blonde girl with glasses teased Ryu-chan about not finishing his parfait, then sounded surprised when she realized he couldn't do it. A hooded figure leaned in, quietly admitting to the girl in the hat that something about this place felt strange. 2 sharply dressed men strode confidently toward the crowd, as the person with a hat and glasses murmured about how crowded and strange everyone seemed. A dark-haired young man in a blue hoodie eyed the crowd suspiciously, thinking to himself that their behavior felt strangely connected to Tojo. A scarred and intimidating figure with long red hair and sunglasses radiated menace, thinking intently about someone he found especially threatening. A red-haired person glared across the table, while someone nearby quietly noted that the man in the strange wig looked just like Tojo. A dark-haired boy glanced sideways and mentioned that Moonshine City Aquarium featured dolphins as well. A red-haired girl suggested they see the dolphins first, and the blonde boy agreed without hesitation. The red-haired girl beamed and said she couldn't wait because today was going to be amazing. Then, the boy with orange hair teased that Tojo's date was bound to be rough, sparking laughter and glares from the table. A train rumbled out of Shibuya Station as someone announced that it was leaving. Pressed between strangers, a blonde boy gripped the subway strap while a red-haired girl leaned into him, looking faint and overwhelmed by the crowd. A dark-haired boy in a blue hoodie blocked the closing doors, holding out an arm as a blonde girl wondered aloud why they were stopping. Amid the jostling crowd, a blonde girl with glasses raised her hand and told everyone to stop pushing and be careful. A blonde girl with glasses hesitated near a hooded figure, quietly admitting she hadn't expected the subway to be so crowded or to stand this close to Ryu-chan. A blonde girl with glasses looked up, surprised, as the unseen boy spoke, and she quietly wondered what he meant. A dark-haired young man gently told the blonde girl with glasses it was crowded and asked her to hang on, promising they'd arrive soon. She agreed shyly. Suddenly, as the doors slid open, the woman in a blue hat cried out in fear, and a hooded dark-haired man shielded her while a silhouette figure surged forward. Urgently, a person in a blue sleeve reached out and told the other to take their hand before they lost track of the people ahead. A dark-haired young man urgently pulled a blonde woman with a hat and glasses forward, telling her they needed to move this way. Sunlight glinted off the tall building marked with the word Ike Buck, its silhouette rising calmly against a clear blue sky. A dark-haired boy caught his breath and told the blonde girl they had finally made it out. The blonde girl tugged gently at the dark-haired boy's wrist and asked for her hand back, so he quickly apologized. A male hand reached toward a female hand, their fingertips almost touching as a soft pink light warmed the space between them. A young woman with green eyes and glasses quietly asked for more gentleness next time. A hooded young man hesitated, agreeing uncertainly that maybe next time would be fine. A cheerful couple crossed the street, while an alert and anxious blue-hooded boy realized they missed the light, and a nervous blonde girl with hat asked what to do. The dark-haired boy in a hoodie told the blonde girl with glasses and a hat they should follow everyone to the aquarium, and she agreed. Still, a nervous young man in a blue hoodie watched as two anxious people whispered that the crowd was overwhelming. Then, a green afro girl grumbled to her group that they should have taken the car because weekend mornings were always way too crowded. Still, the dark-haired boy in a blue hoodie nervously pulled his hood up and insisted they should have scouted the area, recognizing men from Tojo's mansion. Still, a hooded young man glanced over his shoulder, thinking he needed to stay cautious because someone in the crowd might recognize him. A serious-looking woman with red hair and glasses leaned in and told Sento that someone nearby looked suspicious. Moments later, a chibi character with glasses explained that Kim Yusong was the young lady's friend and identified Ms. Kishimoto standing beside him. A knowledgeable and observant commentator explained that a few days earlier, the group had visited the mansion to help Lady Tojo prepare for her date. A confident red-haired character wearing sunglasses calmly deduced that the group must have followed out of concern for their friend, not for any hostile reason. A pragmatic man with a bun suggested they should follow the young lady's friends, and a thoughtful woman with glasses agreed this was their best option. A confident red-haired man in a trench coat gave a sharp order for the group to get moving. A young man with blonde hair told the red-haired girl they'd finally reached the aquarium, his voice bubbling with excitement as they stood before the building. The young man with blonde hair invited the red-haired girl to go inside, saying he couldn't wait to see what was waiting for them. An injured but alert young man suddenly reacted to something unseen, while a calm and inquisitive boy asked what was wrong. A curious red-haired character looked up and quietly wondered if the smiling blonde-haired man who had just entered was Sakamoto. A red-haired character in a neck brace grumbled to a brown-haired boy that Sakamoto got them expelled, yet still managed to go on a date. A determined young man with dark hair promised himself that this time, he would kill his enemy as a sinister figure smirked behind him. Bright lights shimmered across aquarium glass as a red-haired girl and blonde boy strolled inside. Unaware, two others watched from the shadows. Then, the red-haired girl smiled at the blonde-haired boy as soft shadows hid their true feelings underwater. A young man with dark hair faced the light, gripping onto a single, unshakable truth. A red-haired girl beamed, feeling genuinely happy with how well their date was turning out. A young man with dark hair and a cheerful blonde girl peeked playfully around the corner, testing if they were even needed here. Sunlight spilled across Minami Ikebukuro Park as people laughed, strolled, and found a brief peace in the heart of the city. Someone off-panel shouted that the K-Gimbap and Inari sushi looked amazing. A blonde girl with glasses gushed about the impressive homemade spread, while a secretive hooded figure said they needed to eat up before tailing the couple. A blonde girl with glasses grinned as she announced she was ready and took a big bite of food with her chopsticks. Two pairs sat outside as the blonde-haired boy asked the red-haired girl if she enjoyed the aquarium, and she replied that seeing the fish was nice. The red-haired girl nervously said they should eat the lunchbox she prepared. A nervous blonde woman sits across from a hooded dark-haired man, quietly serving him the homemade meal she prepared for someone she likes. A hand with a phone showed Tojo asking for advice about her homemade bento, and the recipient suggested adding broccoli or parsley for decoration. The nervous red-haired girl opens the lunchbox in front of the surprised blonde-haired boy. An impressed admirer told Tojo they were amazed she had made all of the colorful food herself. The cheerful blonde-haired boy encouraged the hesitant red-haired girl to eat as much as she wanted and said he would start with the rice balls. A close-up shows an unseen character eating a rice ball while the red-haired girl watches with anxious eyes. The blonde young man lit up with excitement as he held the rice ball, unable to contain his pleased reaction. The red-haired girl exclaimed that the food tasted amazing. The red-haired girl urged the blonde-haired boy to try the next bite, leaving him wide-eyed and caught off guard. The blonde-haired boy hesitated, nervously mumbling that he wasn't sure about eating the fried food offered to him. Still, the red-haired girl anxiously examined her own hand as she wondered aloud if she was holding the chopsticks correctly. The red-haired girl cheerfully offered food with her chopsticks and asked the blonde-haired boy how it tasted. The blonde-haired boy happily told the red-haired girl that the food tasted great, and she replied with relief that she was glad he enjoyed it. A blonde girl offered food to a young man with dark hair and insisted he should eat too, while he quietly declined and said he was fine. Then, a blonde-haired young man gently offered food with his chopsticks and watched as the red-haired girl hesitated before accepting the bite. The blonde young man asked if it tasted good, pointing out that although the other person made it, it turned out well. The red-haired girl bit her fist nervously and admitted in a quiet voice that the food really did taste good. At a small outdoor table, a cheerful blonde woman in a hat remarked to the hooded figure that things seemed to be going well between the others. Doubt crept in as the narrator wondered if things were unfolding too smoothly and questioned what would happen next. The blonde woman with glasses told the dark-haired man she hoped to go on a date like that someday. The dark-haired young man poked the blonde girl and questioned if she really considered herself a love expert. A confident girl winked and admitted she only knew from manga, while the frustrated hooded boy accused her of pretending to be an expert. The dark-haired hooded young man packed his bag as the blonde woman insisted they keep following, and she added that her advice to friends was genuine. The blonde girl yelled at the hooded figure, demanding to know if he was even listening as he kept walking without responding. A young man with dark hair lets out a quiet breath and relaxes, a faint smile crossing his face. Sunlight streams gently through green leaves, casting dappled patterns across the quiet forest. A red-haired girl smiles softly at a blonde-haired man as they pause on the shaded path, sharing a quiet moment without words. Still, a determined girl in a blue hood adjusts her glasses while her curious companion peers around the wall, wondering if Tojo will confess soon. A dark-haired young man stared in disbelief at the purple gift box, unable to hide his shock. Then, two hooded figures silently watch as the surprised group of four freezes on the park path. Two smug young men stepped forward and mocked their unseen target, saying it took them long enough to find him. All four freeze, their faces showing nothing but shock as the moment hangs heavy in the air. One injured but aggressive guy stepped in front and accused the blonde man of stealing girls and acting like some kind of player. A worried young woman with glasses suggested calling the police, but a young man in a blue hoodie insisted he would step in if things escalated. The blonde young man demanded to know how the rivals dared show up, promising one of them would end up in the hospital if they tried anything. The young man with dark hair realized he recognized the punks. A rumor spread that several freshmen had been expelled from the Kendo Club. A concerned red-haired character explained that some Kendo Club members tried to force them into an alley, but Ruji intervened and rescued them. Someone explained that two people picked a fight with Sakamoto and lost badly, confirming that these were the ones from before. The red-haired boy yelled that they'd been caught lying about the fight, expelled from Kendo, and wouldn't see Fuma-senpai again. Still furious, the red-haired character shouted at the others, calling them idiots. The red-haired girl accused the boys of having a trashy attitude, declaring it was exactly why they were expelled. A red-haired girl looked uneasy as someone pointed out they hadn't recognized her because of all the makeup she was wearing. The young man with red hair teased someone, saying they usually looked like a tomboy but now seemed dressed up, and joked about a possible date. The red-haired woman told the blonde man that acting gentle didn't suit him, especially since he was usually busy beating people with a bamboo sword. Tension snapped as the red-haired girl shouted at the brown-haired boy, telling him to stop insulting Tojo, while the blonde-haired boy tried to hold her back. Three men stood together, and the man with a goatee taunted someone off-panel by saying they hadn't come alone and mocking any attempt at heroics. The injured red-haired boy and the injured brown-haired girl called out urgently, asking their big brother to come help them. A confident blond man with earrings stepped forward and demanded to know if the unseen figure was the one who hurt his brothers. The enthusiastic narrator told everyone that their Hayashi Hyung was a former pro boxer, and the proud friend added he could still be in the ring if not for trouble. The blond boy urged the red-haired girl to run, insisting he was the only target, but she refused to leave him behind. The blond man smirked and told everyone to check out the pair in front of him. Suddenly, an unseen figure seized the white-sleeved character's wrist with a sharp, unyielding grip. The blond man seized the red-haired girl's arms and told her to leave the pretty boy behind if she wanted real fun. The blonde-haired boy yelled at the ponytailed blond man, calling him a pain as the man held the struggling red-haired girl. The blonde, determined young man shoved the dark-clothed aggressor back and shouted for him to get lost as the attacker coughed in pain. Ryu-chan told Rika to wait, and she anxiously called after him, asking where he was going. The red-haired girl shouted for Sakamoto as the blond man tightened his grip, refusing to let her go. The blond man sneered that the man in orange was a pushover and announced he was taking the red-haired girl, while she struggled to break free. A shadowy figure loomed behind the blond man and threatened darkly that he would take good care of the girl for him. A young man with dark hair seized the blond man's wrist, and the blond man cried out, demanding to know who he was before screaming in pain. The blond man was hurled backward, and the black-haired man shouted urgently for him, as everyone reacted in shock. A hostile voice threatened the listener, warning them not to make the speaker repeat themselves and to keep their filthy hands away. A young man with dark hair glared fiercely and warned an unseen threat not to touch his friend. A looming shadow swept across the park as three frightened young men stared at the dark, imposing figure drawing closer. The blond man shouted angrily, daring his unseen opponent to fight back if they really thought they were tough. A muscular young man with a shadow over his eyes stood imposingly, while an unseen observer wondered what kind of training could create such a powerful build. A bruised, anxious, and cautious man tried to convince himself that their struggle was only because of a surprise attack and nothing more. A worried subordinate with a bun asked the chairman if they should really just leave things as they are. An anxious person with red hair and sunglasses wiped sweat from their brow, tense as they waited for what might happen next. Three exhausted men in black suits stood outdoors, and the anxious curly-haired man asked the others where the kids had disappeared to. Anxious and alert, the glasses-wearing man told the chairman he saw the group eating in the park, then urgently pointed out something happening nearby. A blond man seized the wrist of a furious red-haired girl as she yelled at him to let her go. A confident red-haired man in sunglasses marched out from behind the bushes, angrily demanding to know who dared to grab him. A nervous red-haired man in sunglasses faced a worried man with a mustache, who anxiously asked if they should grab their weapons while the leader told him to wait. A blonde-haired man quietly told a dark-haired man they shouldn't get involved with kids fighting and pointed out a boy standing nearby. A dark-haired boy faced away from the crowd, purple energy swirling ominously around him as he gathered his power. A dark-haired boy's hand flared with a blinding, red aura as he silently marveled at the overwhelming force now coursing through him. A red-haired man with glasses stared at his trembling hand, shocked, and muttered that this strange sensation was all too familiar. A powerful, older man with silver hair stood surrounded by chains and ominous energy as someone announced his name and reputation to the crowd. A powerful blue-haired man radiated dark energy, making the nervous red-haired man remember the same instinct he once felt in Japan. A scarred man with red hair sat frozen, overwhelmed by a terror that only comes when facing an unstoppable predator. Kim Yuzung braced himself against the swirling purple energy as someone questioned how a student like him could possibly stand up to such power. Someone off-screen wondered aloud if Kim Yusung's aura matched Ivan's and admitted they wanted him for themselves. The dark-haired young man clenched his jaw and declared he no longer cared about meddling with the original story. The blond man glared at the shadowy figure and threatened to finish him, declaring he was taking out the trash right now. A blond man told the dark-haired young man to leave things to him and get Sakamoto out of there. A determined red-haired girl gripped a blonde-haired boy's arm, and insisted she wouldn't lose to people like this. The blonde man exploded in fury, shouting that he refused to be ignored any longer. A blue-hooded man unleashed a furious barrage of punches at a blonde-haired boy as heavy footsteps signaled an abrupt showdown. Two excited young men shouted that Hayashi Hyungnim's fists moved so fast they could barely see them. The blonde man thrust his fist forward and taunted his opponent, boasting that he couldn't even dodge the attack. The blonde man froze mid-attack and shouted for everything to stop. A black-haired man with visible scratches stood unfazed as others marveled at how he took every hit without even flinching. The blonde man with a ponytail lunged forward, shouting that if nothing else worked, he would try this instead. The blonde man slammed his fist into the man in the blue hoodie's face, unleashing all his anger in one explosive punch. A blonde woman with glasses and a wide-brimmed hat gasped and urgently called out to someone named Ryu-chan. The red-haired girl shouted Kim Yu-sung's name, her voice urgent as the blonde-haired boy turned in surprise. A dark-haired boy with blood streaming down his forehead stood still, a swirling purple aura gathering around him. A bruised dark-haired boy glared at a sweating blonde man, demanding an answer in the heavy, purple-lit silence. Then, the dark-haired boy declared that from now on, everything would count as self-defense. A shocked and anxious man flinched back, stammering in disbelief as a fist flew straight toward his face. An aggressive attacker in a blue jacket slammed his fist into the man in a black jacket's face with a sharp, echoing impact. A purple glowing fist slammed straight into the blonde-haired man's face, landing a decisive blow as the narrator explained that only one hit counts as self-defense. A blonde man was hurled backward, slamming into the ground as a red-haired onlooker shouted for his boss in a panic. The narrator cautioned that using any more force than necessary would cross the line into excess. 3 anxious young men surrounded an unconscious, battered leader while 2 of them frantically shouted for their boss to wake up. An unseen, determined but frustrated speaker admitted they had put everything into one shot, only to be left feeling disappointed by the outcome. The red-haired boy, the blonde man, and the beanie-wearing person all screamed in terror at once. A bloodied, determined young man with dark hair stared ahead through the rain and warned his unseen opponent to prepare for what was coming. A dark-haired boy stood over 2 frightened young men, as one shouted that his father's police connections would ruin anyone who laid a hand on him. A large, pale hand slammed over the shocked young woman's face as its owner threatened to fix her attitude, and she cried out in fear. One figure screamed that the pain was unbearable and begged the bloodied young man with dark hair for mercy, apologizing desperately between sobs. A dark-haired young man kicked both attackers hard, sending them tumbling across the park as one of them cried out in pain. A tall, scarred black-haired man stood unfazed while 2 frightened people pleaded desperately for mercy, begging him not to hurt them. A young man with dark hair told the injured youths to leave and never show themselves to Tojo or Sakamoto again, and they quickly agreed. A blonde girl in a blue dress ran toward a bloodied young man with black hair, shouting for everyone to hurry and calling his name in panic. A worried blonde girl rushed up and asked the young man with dark hair if he was okay, noticing his forehead was bleeding. The dark-haired boy insisted he was fine and joked that a little spit would fix his wound, but the fiery blonde girl demanded they go to a pharmacy immediately. A tense and nervous young man with a bloodied face raised his hand, admitting he had never seen Kishimoto this angry before. A young man with a bandaged forehead stands quietly beside a blonde girl as warm light spills over the peaceful greenery around them. A blonde-haired boy and a red-haired girl sit quietly on the park bench while a black-haired boy and a hat-wearing figure watch them from afar. A blonde-haired boy stands stiffly next to a red-haired girl, while 2 chibi heads remark that the mood feels intense and suggest waiting before approaching. A red-haired girl looked at Sakamoto and apologized softly, saying she felt responsible for him getting hurt. The blonde-haired boy apologized, explaining he was the real target because those guys held a grudge against him. The red-haired girl hesitantly addressed Sakamoto, her voice barely above a whisper as she tried to get his attention. The red-haired girl stayed silent, her cheeks flushed as she kept her mouth closed. The red-haired girl blurted out her feelings, nervously confessing her love to Sakamoto. The blonde-haired young man looked embarrassed and surprised as he quietly asked if someone would stay by his side. An injured and confused dark-haired boy looked around anxiously, while a blonde girl with green eyes gasped and insisted this couldn't really be happening. A shy boy with orange hair finally confessed that he wanted the red-haired girl to go out with him. A red-haired girl, voice trembling with hope, asked someone to go out with her. The blonde young man studies her silently, worry flickering in his eyes. A close-up reveals the blonde-haired boy's lips as he quietly mutters an apology, regret weighing on every word. The red-haired girl hesitated, saying she couldn't give the answer the other person was hoping for. Tojo pleaded with the blonde-haired boy, saying if her tomboyish ways were the problem, she could change, but he insisted that wasn't the reason. The orange-haired boy admitted to the red-haired girl that he once promised to marry someone else when they were children. The orange-haired boy sat nervously on the bench and explained he didn't want to date anyone else until he could meet her again. The red-haired girl looks down, her cheeks flushed as hesitation keeps her silent against the dark, streaked backdrop. The blonde young man looks down, admitting he isn't sure about his feelings, but remembers how much he used to like her. She recalled breaking down in tears when the person she cared about moved away. A red-haired girl sits quietly on the bench, admitting in a soft voice that she guesses you could call it her first love. A red-haired girl leans forward, her voice trembling as she confesses that the person she loved first still means everything to her. A red-haired girl stands up from the bench, telling the orange-haired boy she understands and will give up since he isn't interested. A red-haired girl waves goodbye, saying she had a great time and will see them at school. A blonde-haired young man waves his hand and says he agrees. A determined red-haired girl runs down the path, clenching her fists as she passes a seated man on the bench. A worried blonde girl in a wide-brimmed hat tells Kishimoto to head home because she wants to check on Tojo herself. A dark-haired boy turns away down the wooded path, telling the surprised girl in the hat that he'll see her at school next week. A confident-looking woman with blonde hair and glasses stands outside, hands on her hips, letting out a long, steady breath. A distressed dark-haired boy runs down the tree-lined path as someone nearby quietly asks Ryu-chan why he suddenly seems so sad. A quiet stretch of building wall stands in the afternoon sun, broken only by a row of windows and a small stair indicator panel. A red-haired girl sits quietly on a bench at the bus stop, sunlight catching the small red object she holds in her hand. A red-haired girl lowers her gaze as a person in black sneakers quietly steps closer. A young man with dark hair leans in, asking Tojo if she's all right. Tears stream down the red-haired girl's face as she silently breaks down, overwhelmed by a wave of sadness. A brown-haired boy gently offers a tissue as the red-haired girl insists she's not okay, letting out a shaky sigh through her tears. The concerned and nurturing dark-haired boy tells the red-haired girl to blow her nose, then helps her with a tissue as she lets out a loud honk. The red-haired girl wipes away her tears, admitting she feels embarrassed, while the dark-haired boy reassures her that it's okay because they're friends. A red-haired girl gazes upward at the quiet Sunset Street, quietly repeating the word friends to herself as she contemplates its meaning. A calm and confident red-haired girl tells a surprised and uneasy dark-haired boy that she knew he and Rika were following her. A nervous young man with dark hair admits he realized he was caught tailing and wonders why no one trusted him to handle things alone. Still, the red-haired girl wonders aloud if her friends watched her all day because they were worried, but the young man with dark hair quickly denies it. A red-haired girl, looking down, admits she regrets failing and thought changing herself would be enough to win Sakamoto over. A heartbroken and reflective red-haired girl watches the blonde-haired boy, confessing she finally understands there was never space for her in his heart. A red-haired girl clutches her chest in pain and quietly admits she feels hurt but powerless to change anything. An anxious red-haired girl quietly tells a reserved black-haired boy that she has never felt this way before. A red-haired girl trembles and whispers that she really did it. With tears streaming down her face, the red-haired girl cries out that she truly loved him. A black-haired young man sits in thought, admitting to himself that at first he only saw her as a character from Scramble Love. Then, he realizes that Karen finally feels like a real person. A blonde girl with a ponytail smiles softly, recalling how she only ever offered Kishimoto a polite smile and surface-level kindness. A blonde young man stands apart, telling himself he always saw a clear line between his world and the colorful manga characters before him. A red-haired girl with a ribbon in her hair questions whether someone who feels such real pain could truly be just a manga character. A serious dark-haired boy ordered the red-haired girl to get up, and she asked him in confusion what he meant. She realized things finally made sense to her. The dark-haired boy warned the red-haired girl that if she kept shouting in public, someone might report her for disturbing the peace. A red-haired girl stared ahead, her eyes brimming with tears as silence hung between her and everyone else. Still, the red-haired girl smiled gently as tears shimmered in her eyes. The red-haired girl let out a playful laugh as the dark-haired boy told her he preferred seeing her smile. A physically fit, confident dark-haired male lifted his shirt to reveal toned abs, telling the surprised red-haired female it was time to go. A dark-haired boy handed his jacket to the red-haired girl, telling her they were headed to karaoke when she nervously asked where they were going. A caring and supportive man gently held the hood of a confused, blushing girl and told her to vent all her frustrations nearby. A direct, possibly teasing person pulled the hood over the red-haired girl's head, telling her that maybe now she could finally accept being dumped. A girl with pink hair in a hooded sweater called out urgently, shouting Kim Yusung's name and begging him to wait for her. A red-haired girl in a navy hooded cloak stared wide-eyed, whispering that she found someone's behavior impossible to predict. A muscular black-haired man sprinted through the night, gripping the hand of a surprised red-haired individual as they raced past the glowing building. A red-haired girl in a blue hood offered a warm smile to a black-haired boy as they crossed paths on the city street. A red-haired girl in a blue hood smiled softly, realizing aloud that everyone around her felt the same emotion she did. Still, an anxious man wiped his nose with a handkerchief, struggling to hide how nervous he felt. A serious and reflective red-haired man said he was grateful the young lady had a friend like Kim Yusung, calling him a genuinely good person. Then, a confident man with long red hair and sunglasses ran his hand through his hair and let out a smug chuckle. A muscular man walked beside a quiet observer in a hoodie, remarking that someone like Kim Yusung was rare in such a harsh world. Still, the red-haired man smirked to himself and quietly considered the possibility that Kim Yusung might truly be exceptional. A young man with dark hair smiled softly, wishing aloud that he might cross paths with someone again in the future. A red-haired boy shouted at a young man with dark hair, demanding he cheer louder, while the latter muttered a half-hearted agreement and played the tambourine. An announcer called out that Yusung was up next, while he muttered that waiting 3 hours made him wonder if Tojo ever got tired. An anxious blonde woman with a ponytail sat at her desk, muttering that she hadn't heard from them in hours and wondered if those two would be okay. A burst of sunlight and laughter. A blonde girl with sparkling green eyes lights up the room, her excitement impossible to miss. The blonde girl exclaimed that this was a boy's room, her voice filled with excitement as the dark-haired boy stood behind her, sweating nervously. The curious and observant girl remarked that most boys probably didn't own this much workout gear, and the dark-haired boy replied that his room was an exception. A socked foot stepped close to the dumbbells, and the owner muttered in surprise about finding them there. The blonde girl strained to lift the heavy dumbbell, shouting that it was impossible and questioning if humans were even meant to use it. The dark-haired man explained that the dumbbell was extremely heavy, and the blonde woman exclaimed in shock when she learned just how much it weighed. Still, someone wondered aloud how she had ended up in his room. A blonde girl animatedly told the dark-haired boy how her day began like any other, then started sharing what Karen had said. A sudden vibration jolted a young man with dark hair, prompting him to gasp in surprise. The dark-haired boy asked the blonde girl if she was hungry, mentioning he'd heard her stomach growl loudly. A friendly and enthusiastic blonde girl invited a surprised and curious dark-haired boy to eat at her family's restaurant, catching him completely off guard. A young man with dark hair smiled softly and reassured the listener that sharing one meal wouldn't cause any trouble. Sunlight warmed the little restaurant, its bright sign promising a peaceful break from the afternoon rush. A young girl with blonde hair chewed her food forcefully, her chopsticks clacking as she let out a sharp, determined sigh. The dark-haired man warned the blonde girl to slow down, saying she might get indigestion if she kept eating so quickly. The blonde girl exhaled in relief, clutching her can of fresh cola after finishing her meal. A young girl with blonde hair beamed as she told the woman with a ladle how incredible the food tasted, making the woman smile warmly in return. The blonde girl thanked the waitress with a laugh, and the waitress told her to eat as much as she liked, offering to bring more food. A young man with black hair drank from his cup, quietly reflecting that he hadn't expected Rika to enjoy the cheonggukjang or his mother's approval so much. A cheerful girl slapped the dark-haired boy on the back and told him it was time to go, startling him mid-drink. The dark-haired boy nearly chokes on his drink, blurting out that he doesn't understand where they're suddenly supposed to be going. The confident blonde girl winked and declared they were heading off to see Ryu-chan's room. The dark-haired boy stood outside his room holding a tray, quietly admitting he never expected the blonde girl would actually ask to visit. The dark-haired boy entered carrying a tray with iced drinks, pausing mid-sentence as he spotted the blonde girl waiting just inside. A cheerful blonde girl held up a rom-com manga and teased the dark-haired boy, who stammered that he only bought it for research. The blonde girl teased Ryu-chan about being a secret pervert, and he tried to explain he only bought the manga for research. The blonde girl laughed that she was only joking, then added she knew he liked shonen manga before suddenly reacting with surprise. A row of Golden Samurai manga volumes lined the shelf as someone called out and asked Ryu-chan if he liked the series. The dark-haired boy picked up his favorite book, and the blonde girl exclaimed that she loved the series just as much. A hand-possessed rare first edition manga, and the surprised person exclaimed they always reread the series and marveled at how hard these editions were to find. The dark-haired boy smiled as he shared that this manga was a true masterpiece, praising its stunning art and unforgettable ending. A blonde-haired girl with green eyes smiled brightly and greeted with a cheerful hi. Ryu-chan, the dark-haired boy, gushed about the book's depth, while the blonde-haired girl remarked she'd never met anyone who loved it as much as him. The blonde-haired girl hugged the book to her chest and said her papa would be thrilled. A surprised boy with dark hair asked if she really meant her papa. The blonde-haired girl cheerfully explained that her father was the creator of Golden Samurai, surprising the dark-haired boy. The dark-haired boy shouted in disbelief, repeating the name Musashi Kishimoto and asking if Rika was truly the daughter of the legendary manga creator. The dark-haired boy, sweating, suddenly realized the blonde-haired girl's surname and mixed-race hair matched Musashi's, connecting the dots in shock. Rika, looking puzzled, heard someone say that her British heritage explained her appearance and that having a famous parent was the ultimate classmate cliché. Moments later, the blonde-haired girl nervously called out to the black-haired young man, hoping to get his attention. The dark-haired boy shouted at the blonde girl, asking if he could get her father's autograph during Golden Week. Someone, sounding eager, blurted out their agreement without hesitation. The blonde girl excitedly promised the dark-haired boy she'd introduce him to her father, while the dark-haired boy clenched his fists in joyful disbelief. The dark-haired boy paused and asked the blonde girl if he could ask her something, and she responded brightly, wanting to know what he was curious about. The blonde girl responded thoughtfully, explaining she liked Golden Samurai best, even though Musashi Sensei had created many other popular works. The blonde girl chatted on about how Golden Samurai had become her recent favorite, admitting there was no special reason and calling it a masterpiece. The blonde girl with green eyes held up her book and mentioned she wanted to talk about Volume 5 of Golden Samurai. A focused and prepared warrior with blonde hair crouched low, sword drawn, as someone began to reveal the real secret behind the protagonist. The narrator pointed out how a male character always protected his friends throughout the story. A determined young man with dark hair and a scar warned an unseen threat not to touch his friend. An aggressive attacker drives a powerful fist into the older man's face, the impact flaring brightly as violence erupts between them. The narrator quietly recalled how he always seemed both dependable and gentle. A joyful young man with dark hair smiled warmly, his hand near his chest as soft lights glowed around him. A smiling blonde girl happily read about the samurai, thinking how much she admired Ryu-chan's bravery. The next morning, school stood quietly under a clear sky as the narrator set the scene for what was about to unfold. A sign for the student council room glowed in the hallway as someone questioned if anyone really worked during Golden Week. A serious young woman with dark hair and red hair ornaments told someone she'd need their help on a particular day. The dark-haired boy asked what was expected of him, while the dark-haired girl explained the exchange student would arrive from Russia after Golden Week. The dark-haired boy admitted he wanted to give a memorable gift when they met and asked if she could help him choose one. The confident girl with dark hair and red ornaments pointed upward, declaring with a grin that the answer was exactly right. The dark-haired boy agreed to help and suggested the 29th for their plans, saying he'd make sure nothing conflicted with that date. The dark-haired girl playfully warned the dark-haired boy not to back out, and he was startled by how quickly she answered. The dark-haired girl told the dark-haired boy he could head back now, while nearby, the boy with glasses joked about the classroom being a popular spot for dates. The dark-haired boy wondered if he should ask Rika about visiting on the 30th instead. A sign reading 2B marked the classroom door, signaling where the next moments in the school day would begin. A brown-haired boy leaned in and asked Yuseong if he had heard the latest news, prompting Yuseong to ask what news he meant. A sly and slightly injured delinquent told the injured and curious student about the infamous first-year duo expelled from the Kendo Club, asking if he remembered them. A blonde-haired male student grinned and shared that both troublemakers had finished transferring out, speculating they must have upset someone important. A confident young man with dark hair smiled gently and said he was sure the others had their reasons. A serious-looking dark-haired boy sat at his desk, thinking the troublemakers finally got what they deserved and class could start without them. A light-haired character smiled gently and advised the distracted listener to stay focused during the first class on Monday. A smiling blonde woman welcomed everyone to class and told them to take their seats and open their English textbooks. A ceiling speaker crackled to life, and someone asked which option cost less. A dark-haired young man tapped a blonde girl on the shoulder and quietly mentioned that the apples on the left cost less than the bananas. Zuki Nani smiled gently and told the class they would begin since today was the 24th. Number 24 clutched his book tightly as his name was called, feeling every eye in the classroom turn his way. The teacher asked the surprised dark-haired boy sitting behind number 24 if he could read next. Resolute presence planted their hand firmly on the desk, ready to take charge in the bright, expectant room. James introduced himself as a student from England and asked if his classmates could suggest a good place to experience Japanese culture. Students in the classroom turned with amazement as the purple-haired girl and the black-haired boy both remarked that Mr. Kim's pronunciation sounded incredible. A light-haired woman with a nervous smile asked what might be a good answer for the question. A young man with black hair nervously recommended Osaka, explaining it was popular among foreigners and offered sightseeing options like Kyoto, Nara, and Kobe. Nervous woman stared blankly, while a small male commentator wondered aloud what was so strange about her reaction. A supportive and encouraging teacher praised the nervous but relieved student loudly, telling the class his answer was perfect as the students applauded. A blonde girl told the dark-haired boy his English sounded great, noticing how surprised he had looked just moments before. A blonde woman with long hair read from her book and told the class they would now consider the passage they had just finished. The dark-haired young man looked up, surprise flickering across his face as a small bead of sweat appeared near his temple. The nervous blonde woman blurted out that the translation for the passage was next, gripping her chalk as her voice shook. The dark-haired young man realized what was happening and quietly admitted to himself that he had expected this all along. Still, the nervous teacher wrote quietly on the chalkboard, her movements tense as someone whispered her name at the back of the classroom. Someone silently wondered if she was afraid of him. Kim Yusong walked down the hallway, and nearby students whispered nervously about wild rumors and how intimidating he seemed. A serious dark-haired young man strode past as a red-haired student gasped, whispering that he'd never seen an adult so terrified of him before mentioning Kim Yusong. Kim Yusong paused near the staff room door, telling himself he needed to act normal to avoid causing more misunderstandings. A pair of hands moved quickly across the keyboard, each keystroke echoing the typist's intense focus. A surprised and confused young woman stuttered, unable to process what she was seeing. A surprised young woman with long hair blurted out that none of this made any sense as she stared at Kim Yusong's student record. The blonde woman grew anxious, wondering if Kim Yusong had secret Yakuza training and whether he was just pretending to be a model student to trick her. Still, The young woman with long brown hair looked to the side, her eyes wide with shock as something unseen caught her attention. Kim Yusung introduced himself to the teacher, his voice steady despite the sweat, an unsettling grin that lingered under the dark, ominous background. The nervous blonde woman insisted she wasn't nervous and quickly told Kim Yusung that she definitely hadn't been looking into his background. The nervous blonde woman quickly clarified that she never said Kim Yusung was nervous, trailing off as her own anxiety crept back in. Kim Yusung leaned in, and the nervous blonde woman panicked, silently fearing he knew she'd secretly checked his student record and imagined Yakuza consequences. A dark-haired young man entered the office and told the blonde woman he was here for his career counseling session, catching her off guard. A young woman with long light brown hair laughed softly to herself, amused by something only she seemed to find funny. Nervous dark-haired young man took a seat across from the blonde woman as she hurriedly asked about his future plans, stumbling over her words. The dark-haired young man said he might take over the family business if he couldn't decide, and the blonde woman reacted with shock. The confused boy blurted out that he wondered if the intimidating man and his gang really were the Yakuza, turning to the teacher for reassurance. A curious light-haired girl asked the dark-haired young man about his parents' jobs, and he explained that they run a set-menu restaurant in Setagaya. The nervous blonde woman asked if there was an issue with her set-menu restaurant, her fingers tightly clasped as she faced the dark-haired young man. The cheerful and reassuring woman quickly assured the worried but relieved man that she would love to visit the restaurant someday, clearing up the misunderstanding. The blonde woman asked the dark-haired young man which subject he was best at, and he replied that his strengths were math and science. The blonde woman gently asked if he was interested in pursuing a STEM career, but he replied that he didn't want to choose based only on current strengths. The brown-haired woman froze with wide eyes, silent shock flickering across her anxious face. The dark-haired young man said he wanted to pursue what actually brought him joy. A reflective and empathetic girl noted that being good at something doesn't mean you have to like it, while two boys discussed the misery of engineering students. A nervous young man admitted he never wanted to be a teacher, and the blonde woman asked what he had actually hoped to become. The blonde girl nervously admitted it was embarrassing and asked the dark-haired young man not to laugh, while he promised he wouldn't. A calm young woman with long light brown hair quietly admitted she had always wanted to become a voice actor. The young girl hugged her pillow and quietly recalled how much she had loved a robot manga character back in middle school. A joyful and radiant girl smiled brightly, her eyes sparkling with happiness against a soft pink glow. A person reflecting on their career aspirations remembered saying they wanted to be a voice actor during counseling and recalled that their teacher responded with some advice. A serious man with glasses advised Mizuki she could always find time for hobbies later. A serious man with glasses advised a worried schoolgirl that a stable job would be better, and at the time, she believed following his advice was right. A girl with a backpack stared at the anime event poster, thinking she immediately regretted her college decision once she arrived. A thoughtful young woman with light brown hair gazed upward, thinking she had let someone else's advice shape her future without realizing it. A blonde woman smiled gently as she told the dark-haired young man to consider his decision carefully, making it clear this wasn't advice as his teacher. The black-haired young man leaned forward, saying he could offer advice because he'd experienced the same thing himself. The light-haired woman asked confidently if her listener understood. The nervous young man thanked the calm young woman for her advice, addressing her respectfully as his teacher. A man with glasses glanced over and quietly asked the woman at the computer if Kim Yusung really was the rumored Yakuza heir. The man with glasses smirked and shared that people claimed Kim Yusung might be a Yakuza heir or had even defeated a biker gang alone, then denied it to the teacher. The calm woman at the desk told the thoughtful young man that the rumors about Kim Yusung were simply a misunderstanding. The dark-haired young man was quietly described as an unusually thoughtful student. A warm and encouraging woman smiled at a nervous man as she insisted she wouldn't judge students by appearances, then quickly blamed the rumors for her comment. A young woman with long light brown hair smiled softly, her expression calm and gentle against the warm pink glow. Golden Week arrives as crowds of ordinary people fill the steps of Sensoji Temple in Tokyo. A young man with dark hair checked his phone by the red torii gate, quietly noting to himself that he had arrived earlier than planned. A dark-haired young man called out to the woman in the purple dress, urgently addressing her as president as she walked away through the park. A dark-haired woman exhaled softly, her eyes hidden beneath her bangs as the noise of the city faded behind her. A dark-haired young man stared in shock as an unseen voice accused him of being late, and he insisted that he was actually on time. The determined young woman with long dark hair pointed forward and angrily demanded if anyone knew what time it was. A black-haired girl demanded to know if the anxious black-haired boy had any idea what time it was. The impatient woman scolded the confused man, insisting he should have arrived 30 minutes early if he was meeting a lady. Black-haired girl told the apologetic black-haired boy she would let his lateness slide this time, but wondered why they hadn't just met earlier. A commanding hand pointed at a shop, demanding green tea ice cream from someone nearby. The dark-haired boy asked in disbelief why this was happening to him. The young man with dark hair handed money to the cashier, quietly admitting to himself that paying for the ice cream was acceptable this time. The happy girl exclaimed that this was the perfect choice, and the easygoing boy replied that he was glad she enjoyed it. The young man with dark hair asked if they were just wandering around and wondered where they should buy the gift for the exchange student. The dark-haired woman laughed and insisted she hadn't forgotten, urging the young man with dark hair to follow as he trailed behind with his ice cream. Nervous dark-haired girl listened intently as a voice addressed her through the earpiece. A voice advised the nervous dark-haired girl to visit a craft shop 2 blocks away and suggested choosing a gift there. In the dim light, a confident purple-haired woman quietly told her focused partner to act natural and show off his charm a bit more. 2 formally dressed figures in sunglasses sit inside a car, one steering calmly while the other focuses on her phone. A determined voice declared they were currently gathering intelligence to ensure Milady Kumiko's upcoming date would be a success. A golden multi-armed statue stood tall on its pedestal, radiating an overwhelming, majestic energy that filled the room with awe. A young woman admired the Buddhist statue, suggesting it would make the perfect gift, while a surprised young man questioned her choice, and the shopkeeper praised her taste. The old man invited the dark-haired young man to check out more items, mentioning a price of 7 million yen, while the cheerful girl boasted about her cultivated taste. A confident, unseen voice declared they would appraise the shop's treasures, while the young woman in the purple dress yelped in fear. The concerned older man asked the president if she was feeling ill, and the nervous woman replied that she just suddenly felt a chill. Worried and cautious girl whispered for the awkward young man to keep his voice down, while the shopkeeper asked if he wanted to buy a Buddhist statue. A serious-looking woman with purple hair and glasses told Milady that she was here for a date, not statues, and urged her to look behind. The young man with dark hair stands by the window, staring at his phone with a blank, distant expression. The black-haired girl complained about how not boring your partner is the most basic dating rule, then reluctantly admitted that she understood. The dark-haired young man reacted with surprise as someone off-panel suddenly grabbed his jacket sleeve, saying he had completely forgotten. A young woman urgently told the older man she had something important to do, grabbed the dark-haired man's arm, and hurried out while he protested about his collection. Someone off-panel asked if the president was okay. The worried young man reached out, asking the startled young woman if something was wrong. The smiling woman with a red fan brushed off her dizziness and told the concerned man they should move on, so he reluctantly agreed. The narrator encouraged the listener to visit the traditional clothing shop and check out the kimonos and yukatas. The young woman with dark hair told someone she'd follow their directions, explaining she had already arranged everything with the owner. Faceless mannequins in colorful traditional outfits stood silently in front of the WIYA shop. A cheerful presenter held out a kimono and asked if anyone was interested in trying this one next. A young man with dark hair suggested the exchange student might like the kimono, then asked the president for their opinion as a girl watched quietly behind him. A confident woman with dark hair told the shopkeeper that money was no concern and demanded to see the finest items available. The light brown-haired girl smirked with nervous confidence and said she was ready to continue. A confident woman with dark hair showcased an expensive kimono and told the unseen viewers it cost about 500,000 yen. A calm and discerning noblewoman said she found the item decent and asked if she could see something else, considering the scale of a noble lady. One hopeful voice offered another choice, but the dismissive responder immediately turned it down and rejected the next option as well. The clock in the quiet room marked the late afternoon as the narrator wondered aloud what everything had led to in the end. The black-haired boy admitted he couldn't decide between the yukata and the kimono, saying both looked beautiful to him. A helpful advisor encouraging indecisive student suggested she try the gift on herself, and the surprised student asked if she really meant her. The dark-haired girl asked the dark-haired boy if trying it on would help him make up his mind. A kind older woman gently led a silent girl in a purple dress forward, inviting her to follow. A dark-haired figure lifted a lifelike mask and addressed Milady with a sly, unsettling tone. The purple-haired woman welcomed the dark-haired woman and expressed surprise as she recognized her as Minami. Shocked and confused girl blurted out that she couldn't believe Minami was the shopkeeper, while Minami replied she did it just to help her. A masked female ninja soared through the air, confidently explaining she was a Scionji ninja and had mastered every Koguryu technique, including securing the shop rental. Nervous, dark-haired young woman questioned the kimono suggestion, and the smiling woman explained it was her plan to boost her charm appeal. Minami, cheerful and helpful, clasped the anxious young woman's hands and urged her to hurry and change, promising she'd make her look beautiful, while the young woman protested nervously. The young man with dark hair glanced toward the sliding door, mentioning it was getting pretty loud inside. A chibi fighter claimed victory with a 9-hit combo as a player's hand held up the smartphone, the game's triumph flashing across the screen. The young man with dark hair sat back, startled as an unexpected sound pulled his attention from the tablet in his hands. Pink petals swirled gently around a dark-haired girl with a floral hairpin as she stood quietly in the breeze. The young man with dark hair stammered softly, his cheeks flushed as he reacted with clear surprise. A black-haired woman in an ornate black kimono nervously asked what the other person thought. A young man with dark hair glanced nervously up at a calm black-haired woman in a floral kimono as they faced each other indoors. Still, the young man with dark hair turned away, blushing as the black-haired woman in the floral kimono looked at him in surprise. The black-haired girl studied the distance, lost in silent thought as purple light shimmered behind her. The dark-haired girl stared ahead, her expression distant and unreadable. The young man with dark hair suddenly realized something and let out a quiet, embarrassed sound. Someone told the black-haired woman she looked beautiful, and she immediately blushed with surprise. Someone told the young man with dark hair that it suited him, and he glanced away, cheeks flushed with surprise. A nervous man glanced anxiously at a trembling woman in a floral kimono, uncertainty written across both their faces. A confident girl in a floral kimono laughed loudly, boasting to the boy in the teal jacket that this was her serious side and calling him impressive. A cheerful girl in a floral kimono announced she would change into a yukata, while a relaxed boy sitting nearby told her to take her time. Then, a woman in a floral-patterned kimono watched as someone quietly turned the door handle. The girl with black hair pressed her lips together, her chin trembling as silent anxiety tightened in her jaw. Still, the black-haired girl touched her face and hesitated, her voice barely rising as she tried to find the right words. Still, the woman with long black hair whispered to herself that she didn't know what to do. Two pairs glanced at each other, cheeks flushed and eyes wide. Awkward sparks flicker in the quiet afternoon. A confident dark-haired woman in a purple dress strides past a flushed woman, and a black-haired young man behind her lets out a nervous groan. A black-haired woman with pale skin and pink eyes quietly noted that the chairwoman already attracted attention, and now everyone was staring as they exited the limousine at Nakano Broadway. Someone explained that since they've finished picking clothes and eating lunch, it's time to move on to whatever comes next. A girl with long black hair announced she would call for the car, while a boy with black hair asked if she was really sure about it. Someone reflected that they suggested coming here to look around, but things had not gone as planned. A dark-haired boy glanced ahead nervously and said they were attracting too much attention, urging his group that they should move quickly. A dark-haired girl paused, saying she sensed something strange just now. A man with sunglasses flashed a peace sign for the camera as a dark-haired woman held up her phone, thinking another couple was photographing them. A purple-haired woman held up her phone beside a black-haired young man, and the girl told him to get moving while the boy said he was coming. A dark-haired character exhaled with effort, their breath shaky as sweat glistened on their face. A man with sunglasses gasped that they barely escaped, while an unseen voice scolded him for getting too close. A busy street, a dark-haired man explained to a purple-haired man that he needed high-quality photos for his lady, while the other complained bitterly about Kim Yoo-sung. The purple-haired woman told the black-haired man to hide his hatred for Kim Yoo-sung around her lady, then ordered him to hold his bathroom urge since they're on a mission. A sliding door slid open, and a person inside called out a cheerful welcome to the arriving guests. A smiling dark-haired young man announced they had arrived at his regular ramen shop, inviting the curious dark-haired woman to check it out with him. A cheerful young man told the surprised young woman to check the menu since he needed to run to the bathroom. Suddenly, an unknown man with dark hair clutched his abdomen and gasped in pain. A man with sunglasses doubled over, clutching his stomach, while a concerned woman behind him asked what was wrong, and he stammered that his stomach hurt. The man with sunglasses grimaced and said he thought the ice cream from the shrine had made him sick, while two unseen voices scolded him for overindulging and told him to keep quiet. The man in a black suit broke into a run, telling the purple-haired woman he couldn't hold it anymore as she let out a resigned sigh. Korean sound effect text echoed beneath a men's restroom sign. The man with sunglasses leaned against the wall, breathing out a sigh of relief as he quietly muttered that he felt saved. The suited man with sunglasses lunged urgently toward a dark-haired young man in a hoodie, exclaiming in panic for him to wait. The man with sunglasses pointed at the young man in a green jacket, urgently calling out and asking why the vice president was here. A door slammed open with a sharp bang, and someone shouted for attention from the hallway. A black-haired woman smiled warmly, greeting the unseen visitor and saying she was glad they had finally returned. A smiling young man stood confidently behind two displeased companions as a shocked girl spun around, startled by the sudden arrival. A black-haired young man reported to the chairwoman that he had run into the vice president, who was spending the day in Nakano with Minami. A cheerful dark-haired boy explained that he had invited his companions to join him for a meal to thank them for their help. A dark-haired woman, her voice uneasy, invited the newcomers to join and wondered privately why this unexpected group had formed against her expectations. Someone inside acknowledged the surprise of the student council gathering and asked Vice President Minami to come in. Two nervous faces shared a single anxious thought as the dark-haired boy and the dark purple-haired girl wondered what would happen to their date. A sudden impact echoed through the quiet sky, drawing everyone's attention to the rooftop. A black-haired boy tried to lighten the mood with a nervous smile as the group stood tensely at the table. A purple-haired woman apologized for her brother running into Kim Yoo-sung and told the black-haired woman they should just act natural for now. Steam curled from a fresh bowl of noodles resting untouched on the table. A dark-haired woman stared at the steaming food and quietly wondered if this could really be happening. The dark-haired boy asked the black-haired girl if this was her first time having ramen, mentioning he'd only seen it on TV before. A purple-haired woman explained to the noblewoman that she should taste the broth first, while the man with sunglasses loudly defended her in front of everyone. The noblewoman leaned forward, her lips parting as she carefully tasted the food from the spoon. A nervous, thoughtful boy asked if everyone liked the food, his voice trembling with hope as the group waited for a response. The black-haired woman blushed and covered her mouth, saying with delight that it tasted amazing. The friendly, satisfied black-haired boy said he was glad everyone enjoyed the meal, as the purple-haired girl smiled and the black-haired girl ate with chopsticks. The generous and cheerful black-haired boy insisted everyone could eat as much as they wanted, while the polite black-haired girl declined more and the man with sunglasses kept eating. Bright lights and arcade noises filled the game center, rows of machines inviting everyone to try their luck. A plush bunny tumbled from the claw machine, letting out a startled cry as it dropped toward the pile of toys below. A woman in a purple dress pressed her hand to the glass, wishing she could have won the doll, while a dark blue-haired man offered to try for her. A confident and victorious fighter landed a powerful kick and shouted that she had beaten Kim Yoo-sung. A frustrated arcade player laughed and claimed that people were wrong about Koreans being good at games after losing to a smug rival at the machines. Still, Kim Yoo-sung glared fiercely and declared he would crush anyone who dared mock a Korean at gaming. Furious at the vice president's taunt, a sly, confident man with glasses stepped from the shadows and threatened Kim Yoo-sung, warning that he would pay for attracting the noblewoman's affection. The man with glasses announced there was still one round left. Then the confident and eager challenger laughed and told him to bring it on. A shirtless male fighter slammed his foot into the dark-haired girl with horns, and she gasped, asking in shock what just happened. A muscular boy with a fiery fist stands victorious as the girl with a red bow collapses, gasping out that she can't believe what just happened. A smug dark-haired boy stood confidently behind the sweating man with sunglasses, who shouted that losing was impossible and demanded the vice president try harder. The man with sunglasses gritted his teeth and muttered that if this was how things were, he had no choice but to act. A surprised young man with dark hair heard someone call out his name and answered with a nervous, uncertain tone. The man with sunglasses jabbed a finger at the explosion device, demanding another match using it, while the surprised young man with dark hair gaped in disbelief. The man with sunglasses declared that real men should settle things with their strength, not games, and challenged the surprised young man with dark hair to use the punch machine. Someone off-screen hesitated and said they really didn't think that would be necessary. The determined young man pulled open his shirt and said the truth was just now becoming clear. The man with sunglasses proudly revealed his lean, muscular torso and announced he had a physique to be reckoned with, leaving the surprised young man speechless. Still, the muscular man flexed his chest and taunted Kim Yoo-sung, asking if he was scared and how such muscles could be hidden. Still, the dark-haired boy clutched his head and muttered that his companion was being completely ridiculous. The muscular man grinned and declared that he would take Kim Yoo-sung's reaction as agreement to the challenge, insisting he never actually heard him refuse. The dark-haired man held a small round object close to his face and mocked, asking if someone was actually feeling scared. The unnamed speaker said they were disappointed in Kim Yoo-sung. The muscular man pulled off his shirt and taunted his unseen opponent, saying he hadn't expected him to be the kind who runs from a challenge. Flames roared behind a shirtless man with dark hair as he declared that Kim Yoo-sung should watch him closely and not mistake him for a coward. Then, the shirtless man with dark hair stretched his arms while two others watched him in silence. Muscular man with an eye patch roared a battle cry and slammed his fist forward, raw energy crackling around his punch. The shirtless man with dark hair shouted in pain as he drove his fist into the glowing volleyball. A digital scoreboard flashed as the number 960 appeared, signaling a surge of excitement across the arena. A dark-haired girl announced to another that they had reached 960 points and declared it was a new record. Then, the shirtless man pointed at the young man with dark hair and said it was his turn, while bystanders expressed amazement and confusion. A young man with dark hair glanced back anxiously as two women urged Yoo-sung to unleash his full power, promising to cover any damages. The young man with dark hair forced a nervous smile as he reluctantly agreed to continue, despite questioning if the student council should be doing this. The young man with dark hair clenched his fists, asking himself how things had spiraled out of control. A young man with dark hair silently admitted to himself that the score wasn't the real issue. Something deeper was truly bothering him. A muscular man marveled aloud that his body now had a comically strong buff, thanks to some effect from this manga. The young man with dark hair braced himself in front of the punch machine, saying he felt like he could break it with one hit. The young man with dark hair locked eyes with the machine and shouted that he was going all in, warning he might smash it. He declared he would make sure it broke cleanly if it was going to break anyway. The young man with dark hair hurled his fist forward and shouted that he was giving it everything he had. A young man with dark hair punched forward, his fist blazing with energy. Muscular man with black hair crossed his arms and demanded to know what was happening. A surprised observer of the damage yelled that Yoo-sung missed his mark and pointed out the machine's bent, cracked frame. A digital scoreboard flashed 0 points as an expressive and surprised commentator announced he landed in last place. A solemn young man with dark hair stood silent as two women criticized him, one questioning his focus and the other expressing disappointment with a thumbs down. Dark-haired young man thought it wasn't a major break and decided he could pretend it was just an accident. Still, the dark-haired young man noticed the guitar case moving and wondered aloud why it was reacting that way. Suddenly, the heavy suitcase crashed to the ground, triggering a violent explosion that sent debris flying in every direction. A small box hovered in front of the three. Each watched in silence as a faint halo glowed above it. A shirtless, muscular man stood with arms crossed, silently locking eyes with two surprised onlookers in front of him. A serious young man with dark hair adjusted his sunglasses, letting out a thoughtful hum as sweat beaded on his brow. The young man with dark hair announced that he'd call it a draw for today as he nervously adjusted his sunglasses. The muscular, shirtless man declared he would crush the man in the blue hoodie next time, while the hoodie man awkwardly agreed that it was settled. A gentle glow surrounded the self-photo studio, and the narrator admitted things had gotten a little chaotic. Then, a young man suggested they all take sticker photos together to remember the day as three others walked beside him on the street. The black-haired woman considered the enthusiastic suggestion from the dark-haired man, agreeing that sticker photos sounded like a great idea. The dark-haired young man leaned against the vending machine, encouraging everyone to head inside. The dark-haired smiling boy, the dark-haired girl with a lace fan, the black-haired boy with glasses, and the purple-haired girl posed together, all cheerful. Three smile brightly as a young man with dark hair stands in the center, looking annoyed while the others pose playfully around him. All four friends, each wearing animal ear headbands, gather close and flash peace signs as someone snaps their joyful photo. All four, now in oversized sunglasses, strike playful poses and beam confidently at the viewer, as if ready for their own spotlight moment. A hand lifts a photo strip, showing a group of young people frozen mid-laughter in a series of playful, carefree poses. The smiling woman held up the photo, saying she thought they turned out great, while the angry man complained it caught him blinking. Three smiling figures restrain a distressed young man with dark hair at the center as he struggles against their playful grip. The dark-haired woman smiled and admitted she was actually enjoying herself as she held the glowing pink envelope. A young man with dark hair glances back and smiles gently at a girl with long black hair as she holds a colorful grid. Someone wondered aloud if karaoke should be their final stop for the night. A young man with dark hair in a teal hoodie approaches a smiling woman across the counter as three onlookers watch quietly behind him. A passionate man in a suit sings loudly into the microphone, while two in the audience wince and cover their ears from the noise. A young woman with long dark hair quietly sings into the microphone, surrounded by glowing musical notes that shimmer in the air. Still, a girl with black hair sings softly into the microphone, her eyes closed as glowing musical notes drift around her. Three cheerful friends applaud as a long-haired girl blushes and smiles shyly, touched by their encouragement. A young woman with long dark hair and a young man with dark hair sing joyfully together, holding microphones and sharing the moment. Still, a young woman with dark hair and a young man with dark hair share a joyful smile as music swirls around them. A quiet city glows under streetlights as someone off-screen wishes another a safe journey home. A cheerful young man waved from the car window and told Yusung he had a wonderful time today. Moments later, a young man with dark hair admitted he had really gone all out today as sweat dripped down his face. Unseen voices apologized to the calm woman with black hair as she listened silently, her pink eyes fixed ahead. On a bench, two people in black suits told the woman in the purple dress they regretted having too much fun and missing their chance to leave. Still, a calm young woman with long black hair and pink eyes looked straight ahead. A calm young woman with black hair smiled softly, a gentle blush warming her cheeks. The dark-haired woman told the man in sunglasses that she felt satisfied with how much she had enjoyed herself today. Then, a young man with dark hair and a young woman with dark hair shared ice cream together, both smiling in a gentle, glowing moment. A young man with dark hair glanced up nervously at a woman in a black floral kimono, standing solemn and silent before him. The black-haired woman studied the photograph in her hand and quietly said it had been a long time. Still, three children laughed in the sunlight as a dark-haired girl gently placed a flower crown on a smiling girl's head. A grateful and reflective woman softly told Shinjiro and Minami how much she appreciated them always staying by her side. Three sit quietly as the shy and grateful woman in purple tells them she is always thankful for their support. The narrator quietly mused that today would likely become a cherished memory. A man in sunglasses addressed the crying woman with purple hair, calling her my lady, in a voice full of sincerity. The nervous dark-haired girl promised she would follow the crying purple-haired woman for the rest of her life. The confident woman asked the two men if they would help her again next time, and both eagerly promised to support her. White van sped down the city street at night as someone inside promised they'd make the next date a total success, and another cheered. A hand dragged across the photographs, erasing the spiky-haired man with sunglasses and two pairs of silhouettes from existence. A focused digital artist with gray hair drew intently on a glowing tablet in the dim light. A man with tied-back hair paused in his chair, turning slightly as he heard a gentle knocking sound from behind. A blonde girl with green eyes and sharp fangs called out for her papa, excitement in her voice as she reached through the doorway. A blonde woman reminded the man at the desk that her friend would visit tomorrow, and he replied that she had already mentioned it several times. The man with stubble smiled subtly and said he was looking forward to it as well. The Man with tied-back hair pointed his pen and mentioned the friend she'd always talked about, specifically naming Kim Yusung. A bright sky stretches overhead as a young man with dark hair quietly prepares himself for a visit that could change everything. A young man with dark hair freezes in shock, whispering under his breath as anxiety sweeps over him. A young man with dark hair bows deeply as the gray-haired man greets him, saying it's an honor and remarking that he looks like a classic protagonist. A young man with dark hair gulps, realizing he's face-to-face with the person everyone's been talking about. A confident man with a top-knot hairstyle steps forward, announcing to everyone that his name is Musashi, the god of manga. The gray-haired man welcomed the young man with dark hair, mentioning his wife had worked hard to prepare for the visit and inviting him inside. Two blonde women in aprons share a laugh as Ryu-chan encourages everyone to eat before the meal gets cold. One generous and inviting voice urged everyone to dig in, remarking with amazement on how delicious all the food looked. Everyone gathers around the table as the gray-haired man thanks them for the meal. A smiling man leans in, saying that Rika has mentioned the nervous dark-haired boy a lot lately, which leaves him startled. The man with tied-back hair smiled gently and said he was happy to finally meet the boy who had grown so close to his daughter. The dark-haired young man fidgets and nervously tries to explain that he and Rika aren't what everyone seems to think. The dark-haired boy stammered that they were just normal friends and had only met because he helped the blonde girl when she was lost. The older man joked that he was just being protective since the dark-haired boy was Rika's first male friend, and the blonde girl quickly vouched for him. The dark-haired boy nervously thought that any father with a daughter would probably be sensitive about situations like this. A black-haired man considered what he might do if he had a daughter of his own. A blonde girl with green eyes quietly admitted she would see any guy who approached Rika as a threat. A blonde girl with green eyes blushed and said she had warned them not to say strange things when Ryu-chan was around. A blonde woman sat across from a black-haired man, quietly asking if he was really Ryu, as uncertainty hung between them. A blonde woman nervously asked the dark-haired boy why he was staring at her, quickly insisting it was nothing when he looked away. Rika yelled at her father to stop embarrassing her, while Papa quickly reassured Rika that everything was fine and urged her to calm down. A man in a red sweater and a blonde woman sat at the dinner table, remarking that Rika is growing up and starting to get embarrassed about boys. A middle-aged man with a gentle expression gazed into the distance, quietly admitting he always thought the girl would stay little forever. A joyful blonde girl ran forward clutching her white stuffed bunny and called out for her papa, her voice bright and eager. The blonde girl burst out that when she grows up, she wants to marry Papa. A reflective or thoughtful person lifted their hand to partially cover their mouth, caught in a quiet moment after the blonde girl's bold declaration. A blonde woman smiled softly at a man with black hair as he covered his mouth, lost in his thoughts. A young man with tousled black hair addressed Yuseon-kun, saying he had heard Yuseon-kun was a fan of his. The gray-haired man invited the young man with dark hair to tour his studio after dinner, and the young man eagerly accepted, saying it would be an honor. Someone excitedly suggested heading to Kishimoto-sensei's studio right away, and another voice agreed they should go now. Somewhere out of sight, someone let out a long, weary sigh. Ryu-chan hugged his paper bag and told the blonde woman he could die happy after seeing Kishimoto-sensei's studio and getting an autograph. Blonde woman told the tall man she admired his work more than anyone, and he brushed off her praise as they walked down the hallway together. A hand swept wide as someone excitedly announced this was Rika's suite room. A young man with dark hair squeezed the blonde woman's hand and said it felt like a manga library, teasing that she must really love shonen manga. A playful blonde girl teased Ryu-chan that everyone was just as surprised as he was, and he quietly accepted her words while reaching for a book. A playful blonde girl peeked through the doorway and warned the black-haired boy not to touch anything, while he promised to listen. The young man with dark hair sat on the floor, quietly admitting to himself that being in a girl's room for the first time felt strange. A contemplative and anxious person gripped a glowing smartphone, telling themselves they needed to stop overthinking. A cheerful blonde girl appeared behind the door and called out a bright greeting, startling the young man with dark hair as he clutched his tablet. A warm and approachable blonde woman smiled and told the surprised young man with dark hair to call her Maria-san instead of ma'am. A young man with dark hair knelt in surprise as Maria-san, holding a book, announced she would reveal her daughter's dark past to him. Maria-san beamed as she lifted an orange photo album, announcing she had a collection of photos showing Rika growing up. Ryo-san flipped open the orange album, telling the young man with dark hair that these photos showed Rika growing up and quietly asking if it was alright. A young man with dark hair suddenly realized he'd found the photo from when he took Rika to ManhwaCapped and wondered aloud about ManhwaCapped itself. A tall blonde witch winked and lifted her leg, holding up a heart-shaped wand, while a short blonde witch stood shyly beside her. The blonde woman told the young man with dark hair that she had dreamed of cosplaying with her daughter, saying even embarrassing pasts must be inherited. Then, the blonde woman cheered that she'd finally uncovered her daughter's dark past, leaving the young man with dark hair stunned and questioning her discovery. A blonde girl in gothic cosplay struck a dramatic pose, declaring that this was goth fashion cosplay and calling it a classic case of Chinibyu. A loud, urgent shout bursts out, and Mama flinches in shock as she hears someone call her name. Still, the young man with dark hair blurted out his shock, while the blonde woman kneeling cheerfully admitted she had shown him. A young man with dark hair muttered to himself that he was completely doomed. The distressed blonde girl clutched the young man with dark hair's jacket and insisted she had stopped cosplaying, calling it a mistake from her youth. A cheerful blonde woman peeked out the door, announcing she was leaving, while the angry blonde girl yelled at her not to come back in. The young man with dark hair knelt on the floor beside the blonde woman, both tense and silent in the awkward moment. A blonde girl with tears asked the young man with dark hair if he would keep her secret, and he quietly agreed since he had no one to tell. A blonde-haired girl grimaced, letting out a pained sound as distress washed over her face. A young man with dark hair tried to reassure someone, gently telling them not to feel embarrassed. A young man with dark hair reassured the blonde girl, saying everyone goes through an embarrassing phase, but she never seemed to have one like his. A young man with dark hair admitted he also went through a bad phase in middle school, surprising his unseen listener. A young man with dark hair offered to show a photo on his phone, and the blonde girl eagerly told him she wanted to see it. The young man with dark hair found what he was looking for on his phone, as the blonde girl watched him with hopeful anticipation. An unknown hand offered a smartphone to the blonde-haired woman, and she reached out in shock, asking what was happening. The blonde character stared at the smartphone, her voice trembling as she wondered aloud if what she was seeing could really be true. Still, Ryu-chan stood confidently with dark energy swirling as someone questioned if it was really him and declared the power of darkness was awakening within. The blonde girl sitting on the floor teased the nervous dark-haired boy, asking how he got so bulky since he used to be small and cute. The dark-haired boy admitted he used to feel scrawny and weak, so he started working out and quickly grew taller before high school. The blonde woman holding her phone turned to the dark-haired boy and asked if he regretted not meeting her 2 years earlier, then wondered if he disliked her now. The blonde woman snapped at the black-haired man, demanding to know what he meant and insisting he had no idea how much she cared, while he just looked confused. The blonde woman with wide eyes gasped and covered her mouth, blurting out her shock. The black-haired young man looked to the side with a nervous smile, quietly asking if the person before him was really Rika. Blonde woman and a dark-haired young man lock eyes, both blushing and sweating in silence as the awkward tension lingers between them. A nervous blonde girl and a blushing dark-haired boy stand inches apart, caught in a tense silence as pink light sparkles behind them. A young man with dark hair nervously called out to the blonde girl, unsure if he recognized her. A nervous blonde woman tries to greet a blushing, sweating dark-haired man, but her words catch in her throat. The blonde woman clenched her fists, lowering her head as she firmly told the dark-haired man she only thought of him as a good friend. A young man with dark hair, cheeks flushed, stammered that he wanted to be a good friend. The blonde girl awkwardly insisted they really were good friends, and the young man with dark hair nervously agreed with a forced smile. A blonde woman stood beside a dark-haired man, both blushing and sweating as awkward silence hung between them. Someone called out to Rika, and she answered with a quiet, uncertain yeah. A dark-haired man smiled warmly as he told the blonde woman he was grateful she invited him over and let him meet Kishimoto-sensei. A blonde girl with green eyes smiled warmly, telling Ryu-chan she would never forget today and inviting him to visit whenever he liked. A young man with dark hair smiled and confidently affirmed what someone else had said. The dark-haired man assured the blonde woman he would visit again, his smile lingering as they enjoyed their moment together. Someone unseen expressed regret that the visitor hadn't stayed a little longer, The tall, dark-haired man decided it was time to leave and told the blonde woman he should head home for dinner. A cheerful blonde girl grinned and told someone she was leaving for Hawaii on a family trip tomorrow. On the glowing city street, the dark-haired boy wished the cheerful blonde girl a safe trip and told her not to forget sunscreen. A dark-haired man thoughtfully told the blonde woman to call him if anything happened, joking that he would swim to Hawaii if needed. A calm dark-haired boy watched a muscular swimmer cut through the water, quietly thinking it might be possible for him with his own physique. A playful blonde woman teased a dark-haired man about spending money on a plane ticket, laughing that he was more sensible than she expected. A cheerful and friendly blonde girl waved goodbye, telling Ryu-chan she would see him at school, and he replied with an easygoing agreement. A young man with dark hair glanced back and told someone he'd see them at school, his smile warm against the fading light. A blonde-haired woman with green eyes gazed ahead in silence, her calm expression reflecting a quiet, thoughtful mood. A nervous girl gripped her shirt tightly, anxiety written across her face as she tried to steady her breathing. A young man with dark hair stared at the glowing sunset and muttered in frustration that he couldn't believe how serious things had gotten. A surprised blonde girl asked if Kim Kuin really lived nearby, and Kim Kuin replied that his place was just 2 stops from Seiho at Chito's Funabashi. A cheerful blonde girl laughed and told a tall, dark-haired man that it was just gimbap, but she thanked him for enjoying it. Someone off-screen said they loved the meal and asked that Tojo's mother be told, while another voice praised Tojo for working so hard for someone else. A young woman with blonde hair gazed at the 2 students in the background, quietly hoping she could become someone kind like them. A protective young man with dark hair gently reassured the blushing blonde girl in a hat that things might be uncomfortable, but they were almost there. Urgency rising, a young man with dark hair shouted that they were about to lose their pursuers and urged someone to grab his hand. A young man with black hair smiled softly, a gentle calm settling across his face as warm light filled the scene. A confident dark-haired man stood in front while a nervous blonde woman watched him anxiously from behind. A blonde woman with a gentle smile touched her collarbone as warm light wrapped softly around her. Golden Week, Day 5, Akihabara bustled under a clear blue sky. A resolute and determined figure stepped forward, their footsteps echoing with purpose on the concrete. A young man with dark hair scrolled through his phone, quietly noting he had finished buying all the manga he needed. He wondered aloud if he should grab something to eat before heading out. The indecisive figure stepped forward and quietly considered just going to their regular ramen shop instead. A blue-haired girl yelled urgently, telling everyone to move out of her way. A young man with dark hair turned his head, sounding confused as he asked what was going on. Suddenly, a blue-haired girl in a green beret launched herself toward a dark-haired man, and he blurted out a confused question. Someone off-screen sounded baffled, asking why there were panties floating through the air. A young man with dark hair took a direct hit to the face from a massive pink fist. Confusion echoed as someone off-screen wondered what had just happened. A mysterious and assertive girl lifted a pair of panties toward a dark-haired man, leaving him shocked and utterly confused by the bizarre situation. A dark-haired man grimaced in pain, clutching his injured arm, while a blue-haired woman watched him with growing concern. A blue-haired girl adjusted her hat and told the young man with dark hair she expected more gratitude after saving him and getting a nosebleed. A young man with dark hair reached out to Mila, urgently asking what was happening as a group of suited men sprinted straight toward them. The blue-haired girl seized the young man with dark hair by the wrist, urgently telling him there was no time to explain and begging for his help. The young man with dark hair grabbed the blue-haired girl's wrist and urgently warned her that she was heading toward a dead end, leaving her confused. The dark-haired young man shouted for the blue-haired girl to follow him, and she quickly agreed as they ran together through the crowded street. A bright ramen shop sign glowed under the clear blue sky, its bold lettering greeting everyone with a cheerful welcome. A man with green hair pointed ahead and urgently told the others to move in that direction as 3 men in suits followed his lead. A tense blue-haired girl whispered to the serious black-haired boy that someone was coming. The blue-haired girl leaned forward, gasping for air, and let out a heavy breath near the tired man. The blue-haired girl thanked the dark-haired man for helping her, and he explained he only got caught up by accident but wanted to know why she was chased. Sasha sat down at the table, introduced herself, and asked the dark-haired man his name. He replied that he was Kim Yusung. The girl with blue hair asked if Kim Yusung was Japanese, and he explained he was a second-generation Zainichi Korean, leaving her surprised. Kim Yusung demanded that Sasha stop dodging the question and explain who those people were and why they were after her, but she hesitated. Kim Yusung turned away, telling Sasha he was leaving and wished her luck with the escape, while she urgently called for him to wait. The dark-haired man in the black hoodie looked back, asking the blue-haired woman why helping her was supposed to be common sense. A blue-haired woman thrust a bag of cash toward the dark-haired man, insisting she would pay him if he helped her. A hand displayed thick bundles of glowing banknotes, the money sparkling in the air between them. A dark-haired boy and a blue-haired girl shook hands, and he remarked that the contract was done, already thinking about spending the money on manga. A blue-haired woman closed her eyes and adjusted her checkered hat, finally admitting she could no longer keep her secret. Moments later, a blue-haired woman in a school uniform radiated a soft, glowing aura as the air seemed to hum with silent power. A dark-haired young man blinked in surprise after hearing someone mention that her father was well known in Russia. A blue-haired woman spoke softly, hinting that something important was about to be revealed. The blue-haired girl calmly explained that she suspected someone was planning to kidnap her for ransom. A shocked young man stared up, realizing the blue-haired girl floating above him was the famous character from Scramble Love. A burst of excitement declared that Alec, now revealed as one of the main heroines, left everyone scrambling to remember her full name. Bright storefront lights spill onto the sidewalk as a friendly store clerk calls out a polite farewell to the departing customer. A confident blue-haired woman in sporty clothes stands in the store and asks how her new outfit looks. The blue-haired girl told the dark-haired young man that the clothes looked easier to move in and instructed him to protect her until 7. A confident blue-haired woman tells a determined dark-haired young man she can handle things herself and asks if there's anywhere interesting to visit since it's her first time in Japan. The dark-haired young man suggested that hiding in crowded places would be safer, questioning if sightseeing made sense while kidnappers were still after them. The confident silver-haired woman assured the hesitant dark-haired man that a crowd would make it harder for their pursuers to act, though he still sounded unsure. Sasha, a popular heroine from Russia, is introduced with a confident smile and a subtle nod to her status in the original story. A confident orange-haired boy grinned and declared that, since Sasha met him first, he must now be the story's main character. A black-haired boy pulled a blue-haired woman along urgently, wondering if this moment took place before her official debut in the story. Then, the black-haired boy ran with the blue-haired woman, questioning if he should get involved as they fled from the suited men chasing them. A dark-haired young man glared ahead, demanding to know if someone was trying to buy him off, and if they meant to insult him. A cheerful girl waved stacks of cash, telling a nervous boy it was simply too much money for anyone to refuse. A dark-haired young man gritted his teeth, telling himself he just needed to endure for 6 hours while a blue-haired girl watched with a sly grin. A blue-haired woman in a black hat smirked, saying she was good at judging people. The blue-haired woman gripped the dark-haired young man's wrist, thinking to herself that she could sense his strength just by looking at him. The dark-haired young man told the blue-haired woman that someone should be able to hold their attackers off for 6 hours. The blue-haired woman urged the dark-haired young man to keep moving, warning that staying put would get them caught, when a voice suddenly ordered them to stop. Men in suits shouted for backup as the dark-haired young man realized they'd been discovered and braced himself to run. A dark-haired young man and a silver-haired woman sprinted through city streets, trading anxious questions about whether their pursuers were elite ex-agents or just a weird brand. An authoritative voice told them it was time to move, and the dark-haired young man immediately sprinted toward the figure waiting on the city street. Without warning, a blond man drove his fist into the black-haired boy's jaw, stopping him cold. A dark-haired young man snaps up his arm, blocking the blonde-haired man's punch as both freeze in sudden surprise. A fearful and alarmed man jerked back in shock, his eyes wide as something unseen sent a jolt through him. A dark-haired young man hoisted the man in a suit overhead, just as the man in a suit cried out in shock. 3 men in suits slammed their fists into the victim of the attack, sending him crashing to the ground in a burst of purple energy. A dark-haired young man glanced back with tension, just as a blue-haired woman behind him let out a startled exclamation. A dark-haired young man urgently told the blue-haired girl to stay back and hide. A dark-haired young man shoved a red door toward the blue-haired woman, and she froze in shock as it closed between them. A dark-haired young man tugged at his chin, thinking hard as he muttered that he was absolutely certain about what he suspected. A dark-haired young man stood his ground as 5 men in suits charged, thinking these opponents were on a whole different level than street thugs. A dark-haired young man braced himself for a fight, thinking his opponents had underestimated him. A dark-haired young man grimaced in pain as a heavy blow landed, and someone yelled that, in rom-coms, the bigger muscles always win. Explosions tore through the pavement, sending debris flying in all directions. A dark-haired young man squared up, ready to fight, while 2 suited men lay injured, and the others watched in shock. Still, the dark-haired young man clenched his fists and told everyone to fall back. A determined dark-haired young man's eye narrowed with focus as he drove a glowing punch straight into the bald man's jaw. A dark-haired young man jerked back in shock, crying out as a surge of red energy struck his chest. A stern, bearded man adjusted his sleeve as people called out his name and bowed in deference behind him. The surprised dark-haired young man looked up at the towering bald man, asking who he was and admitting the sudden hit actually hurt. A dark-haired young man wondered aloud if his thoughts could really be trusted as he stared upward, sweat trickling down his cheek. A serious-looking man clasps his hands, wondering aloud if the muscle correction technique will affect someone else as well. A serious-looking dark-haired young man stands in tense silence while a blue-haired woman behind glass raises her hands, reacting with surprise. The blue-haired woman held her hands up and admitted she didn't think anyone could overcome such strength. Someone insisted there was no way anyone could ever defeat Captain Boris. A dark-haired young man smirked and decided he would never follow anyone again, no matter how much money was offered. A dark-haired young man stared forward and told himself that, for now, he would stick to his plan. A resolute figure stepped forward at high speed, declaring that they would end this quickly. A gray-haired man recoiled in shock as a blurred hand shot toward his face. A dark-haired young man slammed his fist into the ground, unleashing a surge of purple energy. An unseen but aggressive attacker slammed their hand over the gray-haired man's face in a sudden, violent move. A dark-haired young man stared ahead in shock, unable to process what had just happened. Then, a bald man forcefully grabbed the dark-haired young man's wrist, leaving him stunned and struggling to pull free. Suddenly, the aggressive and dominant fighter drove his fist into the dark-haired young man, sending him crashing backward with overwhelming force. The dark-haired young man crashed to the ground, groaning that the pain shot through him. Still, a gray-haired man lunged and attacked the dark-haired young man, who gasped in shock and wondered aloud if this could really be happening. Moments later, the aggressor attempting a grappling submission move locked in an armbar, while the victim caught in an armbar, resisting, shouted out in disbelief. A serious man with a beard stood frozen as an ominous purple light flared behind him. The shocked, injured man clutched his arm and let out a sharp cry as pain shot through him. A dark-haired young man hurled the bald man over his shoulder while the bald man shouted in shock. A dark-haired young man gritted his teeth as he realized he was trapped in a joint lock, cursing his opponent under his breath. The injured man grimaced and yelled in pain that his hip joint was hurting. A dark-haired young man hurled a blond man backward through the narrow alley, his aggression escalating as the fight intensified. A bearded man is struck with brutal force and sent flying backward by an unseen blow. A blue-haired woman wearing a solar cap threw up her hand in alarm, her eyes wide with shock at what just happened. 3 men stood tense in the city street, the one in front reaching forward with urgency as the others watched his reaction. A young man with dark hair stands over an older man in a suit, watching silently as clouds gather overhead. A bruised young man leaned in and demanded to know if anyone would take responsibility if his injury kept him from going to the gym. A blue-haired woman edged open the glass door, glancing at the young man with dark hair as tension hung thick between them. A young man with dark hair radiated a fierce purple aura, leaving those around him stunned by the sheer force of his power. Shadows stretched across the empty warehouse floor, and the silence pressed in like a warning. A mysterious and serious bearded man lifted his smartphone to his ear, his expression tense in the darkness. A blue-haired man in a fur-collared coat quietly informed the Tsar over the phone that Captain Boris had been defeated. The blue-haired man smirked into the phone, insisting that no martial artist in Japan could possibly have defeated Boris. Moments later, a tall man with messy black hair stepped into the purple light, his footsteps quiet as someone off-screen began to describe him. Still, the serious older man with blue hair asked over the phone if the person they were tracking was really the one called Black Yiksha. A computer screen flickers to life as someone anxiously asks if rumors about the Black Yiksha's return are true. Then, someone insists the rumor is real, saying a fight just broke out in Akihabara, and word is already spreading across Tokyo. A hand clicks the computer mouse, the bluish glow from the screen casting a calm light over the scene. Still, a woman with black ponytail sits quietly, her eyes fixed on the bright screen's blue glow. Still, someone doubts the Black Yiksha's strength, wondering if his reputation is exaggerated and asking why he disappeared if he was truly so powerful. Still, a determined girl's blue eyes glow as she focuses intensely ahead. Years ago, the god of destruction named Ivan sought a worthy opponent and launched the first God of Fist tournament in 1999. A powerful man with blue hair stands surrounded by crackling energy as two fighters clash above him beneath the looming God of Fist title. Suddenly, a dark, hooded figure called Fuma Kotaro appeared, his form pulsing with a strange purple aura. The hooded figure competed once, but people said the Black Yiksha fought to the finals and instantly became a legend. A woman with bangs pressed her hand to her face, lost in thought. A serious dark-haired girl wondered aloud if the rumors about Fuma Kotaro's return were true. A tense young woman pressed her hand onto the table, the low light casting shadows across her arm. A determined young woman with long dark hair threw a punch with all her strength to the right. Light spilled into the room as a mysterious hand slowly turned the door handle. A young woman with long purple hair looked out at the empty street and softly murmured something under her breath. A young woman with long purple hair called out, demanding that her father stop and wait for her. For smiling maids greeted their master at the door, and the brown-haired maid spoke up to warmly welcome him home. A cheerful blonde girl poked a stunned dark-haired boy and said she had always wanted to hear that kind of greeting. A frustrated young man with dark hair muttered that of all places, she had to choose a maid cafe, while a cheerful blue-haired woman teased that it was essential in Japan. The attentive maid eagerly asked the young man with dark hair to sit down, gesturing toward the chair as the blue-haired girl waited nearby. A young man with dark hair nervously read a pink book while a blue-haired girl laughed, saying he was too relaxed about being hunted and they'd be safe. A young man with dark hair frowned at the menu and said he'd order the omurus since he'd already accepted the advance payment. A young man with dark hair checked his phone and told the blue-haired woman he couldn't find any news online about the earlier street fight. A young man with dark hair tried to recall what EMP meant and wondered aloud what EE combatants were supposed to be. A blue-haired young woman told the young man with dark hair that EE stands for Easter Egg Company, a powerful Russian military-industrial corporation. The confident woman with blue hair told the surprised black-haired boy that she was the child of someone important, and he questioned her claim. A cat maid named Hayaniko Nyan bounced forward, introducing herself as the cafe's star, while the blue-haired girl exclaimed her excitement, and the dark-haired man stared in disbelief. A cat-eared girl served omurus, and the girl with the solar cap told the young man with dark hair that it looked delicious. The young man with dark hair lifted his spoon, but the playful cat-eared girl quickly asked him to wait before he could eat. The playful cat-eared girl told them there was a ritual to perform before eating and urged them to repeat after her, making the others hesitate. The playful cat-eared girl formed a heart with her hands and told everyone it was time to begin. The playful cat-eared girl chanted her cute spell, making hearts appear, while the black-haired boy got a nosebleed, and the blue-haired girl in a solar hat copied her. The blue-haired girl demanded the hesitant dark-haired boy start the ritual, while the pink-haired girl insisted he had to do it because it was their cafe's rule. A young man with dark hair grimaced as he let out pained sounds, struggling to endure whatever agony gripped him. A young man with dark hair nervously formed a glowing heart with his hands, while the chibi character with blue hair laughed and asked what he was doing. A cat-eared girl in a maid outfit set a plate in front of a young man with dark hair, teasing him to enjoy his meal, while the blue-haired woman laughed. A young man with dark hair admitted he was exhausted, but said at least the food tasted good as he lifted another spoonful. The cheerful girl with cat ears asked if everyone enjoyed their meal. A girl in a maid outfit announced she had special permission to play a card game with a young man with dark hair, while the blue-haired girl sounded excited. A girl in a cat-themed maid outfit playfully declared there would be a penalty for the loser as she presented a cat ear headband to a nervous boy. The excited blue-haired girl declared that the young man with dark hair must wear cat ears and end every sentence with a silly meow. The young man with dark hair nervously asked the blue-haired girl if there might be any other penalty. Someone off-panel challenged the young man with dark hair, asking if he was scared and telling him to just win. A young man with dark hair glared ahead, declaring with resolve that if that's how it was going to be, he would accept the challenge. A young man with dark hair locked eyes with the confident blue-haired girl as they prepared to play their next hand. A pair of playful cat ears perched atop black hair, sparkling against a pink background. A blushing young man with dark hair and cat ears struggled to speak as two unseen voices urged him to say anything for the penalty. Frustrated, the young man with dark hair muttered that they should play one more round, while the blue-haired girl burst out laughing at him. The playful chibi figure teased the young man with dark hair, saying his new look didn't suit him at all. Someone shouted with frustration that they were determined to win the next round. A polite guest stepped through the door and called out a cheerful farewell. A cheerful woman with gray hair laughed and stretched, teasing the frustrated young man with dark hair that he never managed to win a single game. A cheerful young woman with purple hair reassured someone that missing sightseeing didn't matter, since she had a wonderful time because of them. Their footsteps echoed side by side on the tiled floor, neither the girl with white shoes nor the man with dark pants breaking the silence. The reserved young woman with silver hair admitted she had something important to confess, causing the curious young man with dark hair to react in surprise. The young man with dark hair learned the people he fought earlier were bodyguards hired by someone's father, leaving him stunned by the revelation. A worried young woman wearing a solar cap apologized and admitted she snuck out to see Japan, never expecting things to spiral. The man in the dark hoodie told the woman with long silver hair she could go home, saying he would handle the bodyguards and return to the hotel. A confident woman with silver hair stood smiling in the sunset, expressing her gratitude to those around her just as a helicopter passed overhead. A triumphant voice broke through the darkness, loudly announcing they had finally found their target. A confident older man with a white beard and glasses smirked, his sly smile bright under the harsh lights. The dark-haired boy stared up at the helicopter and blurted out a shocked question as a silhouette suddenly jumped from the sky. A hand slammed onto the wooden table, echoing determination through the tense silence. A helicopter hovered in the fiery sky as a blurred figure crashed down near a woman with long silver hair and a dark-haired man. A smug older man with gray hair thanked Sasha for making his search much easier with her recent stunt. A young man with dark hair stared in disbelief, saying someone had just jumped straight out of a helicopter. Someone off-panel demanded to know who thought they could address Sasha so casually. A blue-haired girl in a cap demanded to know how the pursuer managed to find them. A confident older man with an eye patch said he was here for personal reasons involving his daughter. A confident older man with gray hair and sunglasses strode toward two younger people, announcing he had personal business involving his daughter. The young woman apologized nervously to the older man for leaving without permission, and he told her it didn't matter anymore. The dark-haired boy suddenly realized the older man must be Sasha's father. The dark-haired boy wondered aloud why the Russian father and daughter spoke Japanese, admitting that it made things much easier for him to follow. A blue-haired man in a solar hat reacted with surprise as he heard someone mention that the Black Nightcrawler had appeared in Tokyo. The confused dark-haired boy pointed to himself as the gray-haired person nervously wondered if she was the one being accused. A knowledgeable and revealing secret older man declared that the hooded figure was the legendary contract killer who vanished a decade ago. A shocked young man with dark hair pointed and announced that the black nightcrawler was actually named Fumakotaro. Shock hit as the narrator wondered what the young man with dark hair could possibly mean by his outburst. A fierce older man with blue hair shouted that today was the day he would finally settle the score with Black Nightcrawler after 18 years. A blue-haired man pointed at a dark-haired man and demanded to know who he was. He replied that his name was Kim Yusung. An older man with gray hair and sunglasses asked Kim Yusung if he knew Fumakotaro, and Kim Yusung replied that he had never heard the name. Dark-haired man and a silver-haired woman stood silently on the tiled path as the older man faced them, tension thick in the warm evening air. The older man told Sasha he would leave now that her father had arrived, reminding her to get home safely before turning away. A dark-haired boy tried to assure himself there had been a mix-up, insisting he couldn't be Fumakotaro, then hesitated as doubt crept in. The older man in the fur-lined cape demanded to know how the dark-haired boy managed to defeat Boris, his captain of the guards. The dark-haired boy nervously asked if someone could pass along his apology to the big man he fought earlier. The blue-haired man admitted he thought the person was a kidnapper, so he hadn't held back when he struck him. A mysterious presence initiated movement, stepping forward onto the ground in silence. A blue-haired man with glowing fists charged forward, preparing to unleash an attack on a young man with dark hair. The dark-haired boy froze, his face twisted in shock as panic surged through him. Still, the older man clenched his fist as purple energy gathered, readying himself for the next move in the heart of the city. A blue-haired girl in a black cap shouted Kim Yusung's name, her voice cutting through the chaos. Determined hand tore open the dark bag, exposing torn papers and a pink book amid swirling debris and a smoky haze. The dark-haired young man gripped the torn book tightly and demanded to know what was happening. The blue-haired older man smirked and challenged his unseen opponent, telling him to prove his strength as well. The dark-haired boy lunged for his falling backpack, cursing that his new manga was about to be ruined. The young man with dark hair glared through tears, shouting that he would never forgive anyone who dared to mess with his manga. A blue-haired man with sunglasses rushed forward, aiming straight at the young man with dark hair, who braced himself in surprise. A young man with dark hair barely shielded himself as the blue-haired man unleashed a furious barrage of punches, gasping in alarm. The young man with dark hair lunged forward and unleashed a powerful punch, the air crackling with explosive force around his fist. A blue-haired man with sunglasses hurled his fist forward, purple energy swirling as he drove the attack with unwavering focus. A young man with dark hair launched a blazing kick, his foot glowing as he tore through the air with unstoppable speed. Dark-shoed figures stumbled hard, letting out a sharp cry of pain as their foot struck the ground. A confident older man in sunglasses peeled off his leopard print coat, remarking that he found the situation amusing and guessed it must be entertaining for everyone else. A muscular blue-haired man loomed over the young man with dark hair, demanding to know his reason for acting this way. The young man with dark hair recoiled from another blow, protesting that if he truly was a genius, there was no reason to hit him. The blue-haired man punched forward, wondering aloud how a regular student with no training managed to defeat Boris, his own captain of the guards. Then, the blue-haired man drove his fist into the young man with dark hair, declaring that what he saw was absolutely impossible. The older man with glasses called someone a genius, declaring they possessed a rare talent seen only once in a century. A young man with dark hair stared ahead, his breath ragged as he tried to gather strength and whispered that he was ready to keep going. A muscular man with spiked hair clenched his glowing fist as energy surged and gathered around him. The older man with white spiky hair demanded that the unseen listener agree to work for him. A confident man with blue hair and sunglasses punched forward, declaring he would help someone realize their full potential. The young man with dark hair finally understood the true nature of his world, whispering to himself the name Scramble Love. The young man with dark hair looked up with fierce resolve, insisting this was no ordinary romantic comedy. The young man with dark hair and a brown-haired boy launched themselves into the air, each preparing to strike as tension crackled between them. It started like a romantic comedy, but now a blonde girl angrily called the blonde boy a pervert after recognizing him from this morning. The young man with dark hair strained to lift a heavy barbell, thinking he had trained every single day since arriving in this world. A blonde man lunged forward with a clenched fist, attacking the shadowed figure as frustration over constant fights echoed in his mind. The young man with dark hair stood tall, fists clenched, convinced his incredible strength could only mean one thing. A manga cover flashes across the scene, and the narrator announces that the story has transformed from a romantic comedy into a shonen battle series. The black-haired young man said he was absolutely certain, because this manga was serialized in jumping. The narrator explained that competing as a pure romantic comedy in a battle-heavy magazine like Jumping would have been an impossible challenge. 3 frustrated men in headbands gather around a computer as one wonders if the author might shift the manga from romance to action for better rankings. A close-up of the dark-haired boy's intense eye shows him silently considering his next move. A menacing blue-haired man reached for the frightened young boy, declaring he wanted the boy as his subordinate, while danger seemed to close in from all sides. The confident blue-haired man raised his fist and asked if the dark-haired boy would become a scholarship student for their EE company. The blue-haired man promised to cover tuition, college fees, a house, and a car if the dark-haired boy agreed to his offer. The young man with a sinister smile clenched his fist, and the older man recoiled, letting out a shocked gasp. A determined young man with dark hair smirked and declared that he refused the offer. The narrator wondered if, in a typical jumping-style battle series, the old man's strength would actually matter. Someone off-screen stated the blonde boy would inevitably lose to the protagonist, while a blonde boy stood triumphant with his foot on the blue-haired boy. A young man with dark hair slung his arm around a surprised blonde-haired boy and thought that sticking close to the protagonist was the safest move. An older man with silver hair and sunglasses smirked, then said he was ready. A blue-haired bearded man with sunglasses hurled a furious punch, shouting that his opponent might as well die. A young man with dark hair shouted at someone off-panel, demanding to know why they were being so extreme. A blue-haired man slammed his fist into a young man with dark hair, and the younger man cried out in pain from the blow. Still, the young man with dark hair clutched his chest and realized in fear that someone was genuinely trying to kill him. The blue-haired man lunged forward, thinking he had tried to go easy since the opponent was Sasha's father, but now he attacked with force. Then, the young man with dark hair snapped wide-eyed with shock, a sudden realization flashing through him as everything changed in an instant. Then, the young man with dark hair landed a fierce punch to the older gray-haired man's head, seizing the brief opening in their high-speed clash. The older white-haired man clenched his fist at the young man with dark hair, silent tension crackling between them as the sun dipped low behind their standoff. Still, the gray-haired man gazed silently at the glowing sunset, his expression heavy with thought. Still, a battle-worn older man with a blue beard glared forward, his eyes burning with determination. A young man with dark hair reacted in alarm, yelling that something terrible had just happened. A blue-haired older man swung his hand forward in a swift, forceful attack. A hand slammed into the young man with dark hair's face as he cried out in pain. The blue-haired man seized the brown-haired man's face and told him he had some advice to share. Muscular figure clenched his fist, blue energy swirling around it as he prepared to strike. The fierce, glowing-eyed man launched a devastating punch, saying any opponent must be faced with the intent to kill. Still, the dark-haired boy clutched his face, his wide eyes filled with fear. A glowing fist smashed into a young man with dark hair. The world erupted in blinding light and violence. Still, the older white-haired man slammed his glowing purple fist down onto the fallen figure as debris scattered through the fiery air. The young man with dark hair gasped for air on his knees as an older gray-haired man watched him in silence. A young man with dark hair caught his breath, thinking he had barely escaped the other man's grip. A young man with dark hair flinched as the larger man's punch flew past, wondering aloud what kind of move he had just witnessed. The older man with a gray beard smiled and confidently declared the phrase, "double-headed eagle of the emperor." A young man with dark hair recoiled in shock, demanding to know what was happening as glowing chains appeared beneath him. The blue-haired man explained that he was using the Romanov Imperial Secret Martial Arts, known as the Emperor's double-headed eagle. The blue-haired man delivered a swift counterpunch, forcing the young man with dark hair backward. The young man with dark hair clenched his fist, frustrated as he admitted he couldn't track the Imperial Secret Martial Arts with kinetic vision alone. Suddenly, a desperate blue-haired woman shouted for her father to stop amid the chaos. A silver-haired man with a beard shouted at Sasha, insisting she stay out of it, because he had to take someone with him. The dark-haired young man raised his fists, bracing himself for the fight ahead. The gray-haired man said they should join him if they wanted to survive, promising to teach every technique he knew. Large, imposing man with glowing eyes told the determined young fighter that only a true fighter could block his attacks so easily. A powerful entity claimed that the weak always submit to strength and promised to grant power. The bruised young man clenched his fist and told his opponent that only the real Chinibu was standing right here. Bruised, dark-haired young man declared with determination that everything was different in this place. He thought about the friends he had made here and insisted there was no reason to give them up for anything else. A wounded young man lunged down in fury, punching at a calm older man as the older man shouted that not a single one remained. The older man met the challenge with a steady gaze, calmly stating that such conviction was admirable but refusing to give up. The resolute and battle-worn young man declared he would not let go of his conviction as the determined older man thrust a glowing energy blade toward him. A shocked young woman with light purple hair shouted urgently that someone needed to crush it. A strong and aggressive combatant slammed his fist into the man in the jacket, sending a burst of light erupting between them. The young man with dark hair cried out in pain as a searing flash struck his face. The silver-haired older man drove his fist into the young man with dark hair, landing a punishing blow as the fight raged on. Still coughing hard into his arm, the young man with dark hair struggled to catch his breath. Suddenly, a blue-haired man charged at the young man with dark hair, making him gasp in shock. Blue-haired man slammed his fist into the young man with dark hair, leaving him reeling in pain and shock. The determined older man with blue hair clenched his glowing fist, letting out a sharp exclamation as a surge of energy coursed through him. The blue-haired, bearded man calmly catches a glowing punch with his hand, stopping the fierce attack in its tracks. Suddenly, a hand seized the young man with dark hair, leaving him stunned and gasping in shock. Then, the young man with dark hair unleashed a fierce punch, blue energy crackling as it slammed into the older man with blue hair. The young man with dark hair shouted that this opponent was on a whole different level compared to Boris. An imposing older man towers over the kneeling young man with dark hair, radiating dominance, as their confrontation grows even more intense. A surge of dark power erupted as an unseen force claimed supremacy. A blue-haired girl wearing a solar cap shouted for everyone to stop. The girl with long purple hair blocked the older man, insisting he'd misunderstood and demanding her father let her finish, but he told Sasha to move aside. The younger speaker threatened the determined older man, warning that if he refused to back down, they would take drastic action. Suddenly, a blue-haired girl gasped as she was struck from behind by a fist. A dark-haired man dropped to his knees beside the fallen girl as the man with light blue hair shouted Sasha's name in alarm. The bruised man asked if the other would truly harm his own daughter just to keep fighting. A dark-haired man clutched his injured arm while a blue-haired woman knelt beside him, both of them breathing heavily in the tense air. The determined older man with white hair declared in a cold voice that he was ready to end things now. The blue-haired warrior clenched his fist, energy crackling, and punched forward with fierce determination. The bruised young man with dark hair braces himself as a massive fist crashes down toward him. The blue-haired man's eyes widened as he jerked his head toward the source of the sudden sound. Several kunai weapons sliced through the air, hurled with explosive speed by an unseen, aggressive attacker. Both men stood frozen on the rooftop. The younger man demanded to know what was happening as kunai knives landed at their feet. Several black and red shurikens hovered in the air as the user of the black yaksha's shuriken summoned them with focused intent. A gray-haired man jerked his head aside, letting out a startled gasp as an arrow shot past his cheek. A dark-haired woman lunged forward, her knife flashing as she targeted a blue-haired man who spun around in shock. A purple-haired girl with a knife charged at a blue-haired man, while a worried man held his arm and a silver-haired girl hit her face. A disheveled young man turned to the dark-haired woman and asked who she was. A determined young woman with dark hair introduced herself as Fuma Yukika, acting leader of the Fuma ninja clan, as someone exclaimed in shock at her rank. A young man with dark hair demanded to know why the other person had shown up. A serious older man with gray hair considered whether Fuma Kotaro was truly the one he had been searching for. The dark-haired girl explained that her father disappeared after leaving the village 10 years ago. The older man with gray hair calmly said he was already familiar with what had been mentioned. The dark-haired woman gripped her daggers, declaring she knew Black Yaksha's daughter stood before her. A confident woman pressed a glowing orb into the cautious man's hand, telling him to take it, and he asked what it was. The urgent figure pressed a glowing yellow pill into the other's hand, quickly explaining it would unlock power that had been hidden until now. The older man with silver hair told his unseen opponent he wouldn't just stand aside and let their plan unfold. A dark-haired girl gripped her kunai as the boy urgently told her to take the object and promised to hold off their attacker. The black-haired man nervously put the small yellow object into his mouth, saying he just hoped it wouldn't kill him. Suddenly, the young man with dark hair stared in shock as bright symbols began to glow across his hand. A fiery explosion ripped through the air as someone screamed in agony, unable to comprehend the searing pain or the strange, burning sensation. The young man with dark hair clutched his chest in agony as a woman behind him cried out, calling his name in disbelief. He screamed in pain as fiery energy surged through his neck and chest. The hooded young man screamed in agony as energy and flames erupted around him.